pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. Nobody here, so welcome. Before we start, I'd just like to welcome our student reps back. Kate Petka is here for her second year, and Claire Rigney is on here for her first year. So we look forward to hearing from you and encourage you, if you have opinions or thoughts on things that we're talking about, during the meetings, please, feel free to share them with us.
I just want to point out to Sharon, it's Claire without an I.
Claire with an I.
And I copied it right off.
Okay, good. I didn't know. I didn't know.
She was my student once.
Ah.
There you go. Okay. All right, so the first item on the agenda is a consent agenda for our last two meetings. So I think we'll have to do these separately because not everybody was here for both meetings. So I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting on August 21st.
So moved.
Second.
Seconds. Okay, any corrections? This is August 21st, yep. Barbara's here, yeah. Any corrections, any comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, 5-0.
I move to approve the regular school committee meeting minutes for September 4th.
Second.
Okay. And any corrections, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
One abstain, 4-1. Okay. Okay, next is good news.
You want to switch it to them first?
Yep,
And they can
yep,
give the
so
update, and then I'll...
we'll do the student updates, yep.
So first, the high school open house will be held on this upcoming Thursday. The first flex block for high school students will be held on September 26th. And the first senior class fundraiser dance will be the Tundra Tango, and that will take place on the 22nd, this Saturday.
So today was a half day, and the teachers' development was centered around the new ALICE training initiative to focus on what we do in lockdown procedures. And we have junior and senior mentors this week, and they'll be meeting with their mentees on the 21st.
Right. So just to couple on, I was going to piggyback on that. So we did do the ALICE protocol today. I heard from, I think, almost every school, because I did a little check, that it was pretty successful. Everybody had a good idea of what to do, how it was going to be, what next steps are going to look like. I do know that there was some unbelievable cameo appearances in the training video from our staff, from Chief Spinney, from Dr. Lang, and apparently they were a hit. So, you guys are famous now at this point.
Very popular.
I know, exactly. So, and I'd also like to just thank Chelmsford Telemedia for help putting that together, and just our staff and the students that volunteered that full day to help put the different, you guys in the scenarios? The different scenarios together for all of the staff to see collectively. So thank you very much to both of those groups. Our science department is working with the Energy Conservation Commission, and they just received a grant for $7,500 to introduce indoor farming and gardening at CHS. And this will be incorporated into the environmental science classroom, and they'll also partner with our food service department to take that food and make it into something that would be served for our students. So they're excited to start that process. And over 200 of our middle school and high school students, they participated in a band performance for band night at the football game this last Friday. So that was a success, and they had a really good time. So good news.
Very nice. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right, next up is our public comment section. If anyone would like to speak to the committee about any of the items on tonight's agenda, please come forward, state your name and address for the recording secretary. Oh, okay. All right, moving on then. So we're to new business, and the first order of business is establishment of the 2018-19 school committee goals. So last meeting, I proposed some new goals for the school committee for this upcoming year. So as a quick summary, what I propose is that we keep our district-wide goals, since they are aligned with the strategic plan, and maybe add a few more action items, since we did accomplish some of the things on that list this past year. And then came up with 3 new professional practice goals based on the feedback that we got from our school committee self-evaluation. So one of the questions that came up last time in terms of what the measurables were, so what I try to do is just go through and, at least for the main goals, just highlight what the measurables would be for the goal as a whole, and then, not so much detail in terms of the action items, but I figured, that would hopefully help clarify that part of it. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or any suggestions, if you want to go in this direction, if you want to go in a different direction. So I guess I'll leave it up to the group. So any comments?
No, I like that we added the ways to be able to measure,
Okay.
how we meet the goal.
Okay.
Or if we meet the goal.
Yeah. Any thoughts on, are those action steps for the district ones, things that you think we can do as a group? Do you think that the professional practice goals are things that would help us out? Thoughts?
I do.
Okay.
I like them.
Okay.
And I think that one of the things I would like us to also do is to look at these periodically throughout the year to see, do maybe a quarterly assessment or something.
Yeah.
In terms of, how are we doing in terms of meeting these goals?
So one of the things that we're trying to do with difficulty working with the Dropbox is update our list of items like we had last year and add a second page, and we're kind of going back and forth trying to make it stick. And so, at least in my version of it, I have put all those items as things to discuss as we go through the course of the year, and so hopefully
I'll work with you.
yeah, hopefully we get to work.
I like that the action steps are more focused on curriculum. I feel like sometimes we're part of a building construction crew, and we need to get back to this.
Yeah, and again, the district one are based on our strategic plan, so we have 2 more years in that, so I think it kind of makes sense.
I just gotta do this off the, I don't remember if it's in here or not already. I've been besieged by people wanting to investigate and find ways to reduce and eliminate fees. Is that in there?
It's actually, we're going to speak about it tonight a little bit.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, it is one.
With you
one-
completely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that we have. We're going to start that
I mean, it's a
discussion tonight.
football game, talk about, it wasn't one conversation,
Yeah.
and I was surprised,
Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's been on the back burner kind of, but
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah, if I can jump in for a sec, we will talk a little bit
Okay.
about that later on tonight, but I think one of the issues that we're gonna have when we're having the discussion is it is a revenue source
Oh, I
for our
know.
budget, so it's gotta be something that we take into consideration when putting the whole budget together. I don't think it's just a quick kind of one-night
Right.
review or decision, because there's so many moving parts, but I think, your goals for the year certainly address it,
Yeah.
and even when it comes to budget prioritization, it can be factored in.
Well, the other thing is, even if you got it for 1 year, it's not a one-year problem, it's a several-year problem, which I
Right.
think people, because actually a couple of people targeted, they said, look, you got this amount of money here now, yeah, but it's the next year, and the
Right.
next year, So anyway, okay, thank you.
So anything else on goals? Okay,
No,
do-
I'm happy with them. I'm glad we're
Right.
continuing to
Should
move
we
forward.
vote to approve them tonight? Everybody comfortable with that? All right, so I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the school committee goals for 2018-19 as presented.
Second.
Second. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, all right, next up, public forum on school safety, so, wanna,
Yeah, just to refresh the committee's memory, at the last meeting, we talked a little bit about trying to have some community forums or community focus groups to talk about different educational interest items. And because the district is putting a significant amount of time into school safety and planning and preparedness, we thought the highlight of the first meeting in October could be a public forum on that. So when we left the last meeting, I was tasked with trying to check a couple of dates for times and availability. The first date that we actually wanted worked. So we are going to hold the first community forum on Tuesday, October 9th at 7 o'clock over in the police department's training room. Right when you walk in on the left is kind of stadium seating. So we'll be there. We are coordinating with telemedia, so they will shoot the show live and then also do some replays. So I will work with the chair to kind of review a little agenda for that evening, but we'll put a presentation together similar to what our staff received in the schools, and to let parents and families know a little bit about what the training is going to entail, how it's going to be rolled out over the course of the fall, what kind of switches it is for us, and then kind of a question-answer type period with interested members of the public. I did get the meeting posted, just so we covered ourselves posting-wise, because the full committee will be present, hopefully. And Linda actually helped us put together a little flyer that after this evening, if you give the approval on, we will start pushing out through social media and Twitter and things like that to try to drum up some participation for that meeting.
Are we planning to invite fire or police or anybody to
Yeah, I'm going to
participate?
coordinate with the chiefs
Okay.
and just figure out who would make sense to try to be there for that. But Kelly Rogers, who's been helping us with our implementation district-wide of the safety plans, she'll be there as well. And we'll probably have some staff on hand, at least representation from the elementary, middle, and high school levels of the district, just in case questions come up from
Is there
parents.
a civil defense person anymore? The reason I ask, Walter Helen used to be, he used to be part of all of this, and now I don't hear anybody, so I don't know whether he is even the person there. Just,
I haven't heard that name, to be honest
I
with
know.
you.
but it could be important at some point.
Yeah.
You're right.
Just something.
I hadn't thought about that.
He was it
I
for
can
ever. so
certainly
I-
check for you. We typically have just been working with the police chief and the fire chief.
Yeah, I know, it's just.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So
Anything
if
else?
this looks good, we'll get it promoted. Linda's already promoted it, so we're
Good.
we're doing
All
okay.
right, next item is a discussion. Barbara wanted to bring up some things about starting school a little later, so Barbara, if you want to?
Yep, this is the result of a conversation I had with a school committee member in Westford, and they're moving on implementing a later school start time either next year or 2020. Acton Boxborough has already done it, a number of schools have already done it, the entire state of California has done it. It's moving this way. And there are several reasons, and I'm just gonna point everyone to startschoollater.net. 3 words, .net. One good point they make is the kids, the youngest kids who require the most supervision go to school the latest. It would seem that if they went to school when their parents went off to school, there would be a reduction in the cost for them to have before school care. The health impacts are well noted by the American Pediatric Association. They talk about the safety of students getting up while it's still dark. A lot of them are learning to drive or new drivers. And as school districts start to turn over to this, we're going to be challenged because their sports will be on a different schedule than our sports because they've already turned over. I just want to put it on people's plate and let you do some research on it. Startschoollater.net.
There's a group of students at the high school who have taken this initiative on. I believe one of the students actually was a student of the month for the Rotary Group.
Presentation today was one of the best student presentations I've heard in my whole life. He's unbelievable. I don't know where he's going, but he's going way up.
So there is a group of students who had begun looking into this and putting together a presentation, and I believe that there's a possibility that they'll be working with the Council of Schools to do a presentation later on this year as well.
Okay. And would this involve switching, like, just switching the elementary schools and the high school kids? How would it?
There would be a swap in a sense.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would affect the middle school age because, you know, they would also, we would gear toward a little later start for them, I would hope. But, you know, you look around at the communities that are flipping, they're high-performing districts, they recognize the importance of this. I think Brookline is another one. I think it's coming, so I'd like to be prepared rather than react.
Definitely keep it on the list, Al?
I've heard a little bit about this, even today, obviously. I understand the research and everything else. My only concern is the change has to be, in my opinion, a significant one. A number of the districts are changing everything for a half hour, which in my opinion doesn't address the issue at all. So, but as you make it an hour or an hour and a half or whatever, which addresses one of the major concerns, it causes huge concerns. You know, that's the problem with the thing. When you better address the scientific concerns, the more the problems. And that's why this has been such a, in some towns, according to the presentation I heard today, very divisive. So that's where I'm coming from, you know, having thought about it a little bit.
Didn't they try to do it at Boston, and it was a big
Yeah.
push against it?
I don't know, I just think that there's more attention on it now than there ever has been. There's more research available than there ever has been. I think that when you have an entire state changing their policies on this, I think there's something that we need to consider.
I just want to say, if it does show educational outcomes, improves them, I mean, and it's something we should definitely look at and consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta look at the pluses and minuses of both. I
Yeah.
mean, there are definitely
Yeah.
pluses and minuses, you know.
Well, there's another basic thing, and that's assuming that the students react in some way, which is not necessarily going to happen.
That's
I'm
true.
sure there's some logistical
Yeah, I'm
components,
sure.
right, so.
Yeah, I mean, one of the I think it certainly needs to be on people's radar, because there has been enough discussion about it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different factors that kind of come into play. I think one of the significant ones is logistical around, say, student transportation. So the way that we actually go out to bid and award a contract for transportation is we try to utilize a school bus 3 runs in the morning and 3 runs in the afternoon. So we're basically getting 6 runs off of the school bus. We have our high school going in first, followed by our middle schools, followed by our elementary. If we weren't to, and again, we'd have to figure out which districts are doing this, because some districts don't provide transportation to high school students. So if that were the case, and it wouldn't matter if we actually moved the high school time, if it didn't affect the elementary or the middle school time at all, you'd only be talking about moving one building. But for economy and logistics, typically what school systems have done is either flip their first school with their third school. So you would have the elementary schools come in first at, say, 7:19, and the high school kids, go in later on, around the 9 o'clock starting time. Or if that's too late for some high schools, sometimes you also then get into a third move, which is having the elementary school kids come in first, the middle school kids bump up to be the last school, and the high school slides into the second slot. So you're basically going elementary, middle, and high school. I'm sorry, elementary, middle, and high school. But you're basically affecting all of the students in the district by doing that. So you really have to, work with parents, kind of gauge their ability to, and interest in doing that, coordinate schedules. There's a lot to be done with it. And I think some of the schools that have kind of quickly gone and adopted that, we'd have to proof this out, but don't necessarily provide transportation to their high school students because we're not required to. So again, if we didn't have to provide transportation and you were only affecting that one school, there's no reason why the high school couldn't move an hour and start at the same time as the middle schools or the elementary schools. But where we're trying to utilize the school buses to do 3 different runs, that's problematic. You also do get into different kind of daycare issues with siblings and part-time job issues and sport issues, so it needs to be a coordinated effort. I do know that in the Merrimack Valley, Andover and the Andover School Committee are looking at that this particular year. They've sent out some information, and they're kind of doing a lot of legwork on this. I had planned to just watch kind of the work that they're putting together on it, and if I get anything from them, I certainly can relay that to you as far as their thought process of their research on it. Like I said, it's certainly something to be speaking about and watching, because there is a trend going that way, but there are just a lot of moving parts, and we'd have to kind of gauge and see where our community is with regard to how dramatic of an implementation to something like that they'd want to see.
Would it be possible to invite the student in who's done so much research on this to give us a brief presentation on some of the stuff that he's found?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I don't particularly know the student.
Oh, I do, yeah.
It's
and-
Carlos, and then it's two other names, but I don't remember.
yeah, I
It's
was-
Carlos something Garcia.
Yeah, so.
The only thing I don't know, if you want to, I mean, we could have groups come forward to do that. You could then also have groups that are opposed to it come forward. And I just don't
Okay.
know if we want to have that dynamic
Sure.
coming out of the gate.
I understand. I always just thought he's done so much work that it might be a nice opportunity for him to present some of the research that he's done.
There's a
So-
ton of research on this website as well.
Yeah.
And I encourage you to look at its top studies.
But maybe that's a topic for another public forum, where
Yeah,
we can allow
absolutely.
back and forth
Yeah.
between pro and,
Yeah. Yeah,
anti.
great idea. Yeah.
That might be something we could do. Any sort of type of schedules. I know you're gonna speak about some things in terms of extended learning. That's kind of a schedule change too possible. Maybe that just have a general forum on
Could be
Yeah,
the
that's
second-
a
possible
great
changes
idea.
in schedule, vacation times and starting times and,
Right.
that type of thing.
Yeah, that would be a
So,
great one.
Okay.
And I think, part of that would probably have to be getting the pulse from parents and just
Yeah.
feeling them out with polls and through the emails. Hopefully get a good response and then get a feeling for it, because parents have an opinion.
Absolutely.
Perhaps if we had that be the second kind of forum, perhaps we could flesh out the questions we want to have asked of students and parents. And then we could do a survey and get the results and
Great.
and talk about it.
Are we good on that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so next item, Donna wants to speak on extended learning opportunities.
Yes, so I've had the opportunity to speak with a couple of teachers that were interested in maybe putting together a committee to look at extended learning time in order to be able to address snow day issues in particular. I think extended learning time is really a much better way of saying blizzard bags. But I think that's what we're talking about here. And, all I can think about is, Andover, Lawrence, and North Andover last week already into their snow days, in the beginning of September, and, how we've also gone through some snow days at the end of October in the recent past. And I think that we would be wise to think about putting together a plan for how it is that we're going to address if we get to a certain point, rather than finding ourselves in a reactive position like we were last year. So I know that there's people that are interested. I think it might be worth exploring. They seem very enthusiastic and very motivated to be able to look at this issue, and I definitely think it's something worth, pursuing. So one other thing is I also think, too, that the sooner that we do this, the better, because later on in the year, if we're going to make adjustments in the schedule, then parents are prepared. And they have the opportunity to be able to make changes in their work schedule or childcare schedules, with very advanced notice. So.
And beyond just, it's not just blizzard bags, it's, if we get to day 6.
Right, exactly.
What is the alternative, are we talking a Good Friday, or what would be the,
Right.
the plan? So
Right.
people know ahead of time rather than
Right.
right at the last minute.
Yeah, this may be one of the last options that we use. But I know that there's a lot of places around that are using it, and so maybe it would be worth looking into it.
Yeah, I know, I'm all for looking at the calendar and, saying, if we happen to hit X number of days and we're gonna exceed a date, do we need to take back the Good Friday like we did last year, which was actually successful? Other districts have gone in on Saturdays, iffy on the response. The whole blizzard bag, kind of deferred learning type option, I know Linda has worked on, even with the local assistant superintendent groups. It's really a mixed bag, not to
Absolutely.
blizzard bag, yes.
Yeah.
But there are some issues. So it's not to say it shouldn't be discussed, because I think statewide things are being discussed. There's not uniform agreement that
Right.
really that is the way to go, or.
Yeah, can I just jump
yeah.
in a little bit? So a couple of things, if you do form a committee, typically people think something's moving forward, so you have to be super careful when you start with a committee. Couple of things, last year, even when we did the extended daytime, you have to get permission from the commissioner to get these things. And I will tell you that I wasn't a fan of that, but he let it go given the situation that happened. So I'm not sure where he stands at this point on extended learning time, because that's what they call it. So as a area assistant superintendents, we got together, because Burlington was the first group to come out with something like this
Yes, they
several
were.
years ago.
Yep.
And we did have Patrick Larkin come, who was the assistant superintendent there, to speak to us. And North Middlesex has been working on this. I know that Westford did a similar thing to, rather than extending the school day like we did, they had some type of work piece that went to it.
Right.
There are, there's many glitches with it, and everybody said it is not perfect. I mean, you're talking about a lot of policing. What are the teachers doing? What do you do if students don't have connectivity to the internet, or don't have a computer at all, or electricity in their home? I think one of the other things you really have to keep in mind is that we owe special ed services to these students, and you can't do that virtually in a situation like that, so there's a lot of nuances. So the only caution I would throw out there is that if you put a group together, a committee, to analyze this stuff, what does that look like in the end? Is it gonna be kind of, disappointment if it doesn't fly? So those type of things.
Well, actually, I was
We've all
hoping-
been on those committees before where.
Actually, I was hoping you would put the committee together.
Oh, great, great, yes, yes, that's what I figured you were going with, but I was curious how you.
Speaking up, lady.
Yeah. I think that if you have some teachers who are motivated and want to look at this, then, I say we seize the opportunity and let them explore that. And, going into it, say, look, this is an exploration process. We are not making any commitments to doing anything but let's do our due diligence and get all the information out on the table and then make the best decision for the system. So that would be my recommendation, so.
Do you have Linda do it?
I second.
All in favor?
In all sincerity, because I think you have the best overview and the most, the best knowledge base in terms of all of these things. And
Right,
I-
because it can't just be some lesson, right? It has to,
Correct.
if we had a crystal ball, although every time we had a community coffee, there was a storm and we had to cancel it, so I think we know what days the storms are gonna be on this year. We already have those dates, so if we had a crystal ball, it would be great, but it is hard to trying to incorporate it last minute with it not just being additional work that many teachers, including myself, would say, listen, it looks like we're gonna have a storm. I want you to get ahead by doing, a couple, you guys probably can attest to this, do a couple of chapters, get
Right.
some questions, because anybody could do that. And then what does this look like for PE, art, music, it's just a lot of nuances. And
Exactly.
I'm sure you're aware of that, but I think the bigger things include definitely what does that look like for special ed services for students, and where does that put our teachers that might not have access to a computer, and how long are they gonna be online? So there are a lot of different ways that districts have done this. Like I said, Westford
Right.
went one way, North Middlesex went a different way. Burlington, they didn't have to bring it forward because they weren't in a situation where they needed additional days. So
Right,
they have that stuff just sitting there. So certainly that can be explored. I just wanted to make sure that people didn't feel as though that's they'd be disappointed because
Absolutely.
nothing would move forward at that point.
Right, I would be happy
have
if
to
we just took a
negotiate
look at it,
New Hampshire has it. They
No.
allow, their Department of Education, whatever allows for it. We did some research on this a few years ago. The one thing when you say teachers might not have computers, students they may not have electricity.
Right.
That's the
So
big thing.
Right.
that's, those are the
Right.
assignments that will be tricky.
Absolutely. But and it may not just be, assignments. There may be other ideas or things that they may have.
And the only other piece is just for the parent point is that you are shifting that burden of them turning into, for lack of a better word, the coach. And we've all been there when we've just asked our kids to do, I don't know, a paragraph of reading, perhaps, and there's the big argument, and then they don't feel comfortable maybe helping their students with maybe some of the more advanced mathematics or the science. So, those are little other nuances to keep in mind that, that does shift it onto the parent, and then where does that leave the child? And I'm not trying to bring up all the negative,
Nope,
but that's a biggie, because I know some parents are like, whoa, hey, I have enough trouble just trying to get homework with my own children, let alone if it's like a assignment that's gonna be graded,
Right.
let's say.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, moving on, next item is just a follow-up to a question that came up at Springtown meeting about the use of parking fees, so.
Yeah, thank you. At Springtown meeting, one of the town meeting reps had brought forward a question regarding the way that we were collecting and accounting for the student bus fees. So I'll just give you a little synopsis. I tried to write down the whole kind of scenario here. But basically, as you know, K to 6 in the district, if children live more than 2 miles from the school, we're required to provide them with transportation. Anyone who lives 0 to up to the 2 miles can opt for transportation if they want to, and they pay the transportation fee. Anyone grades 7 to 12, if they want to have transportation, they basically pay the student bus fee. Typically around junior year, when high school students get their driver's license, if they've already purchased a bus fee for the year, they can turn their bus pass in and get a parking pass to park in the high school parking lot. So that doesn't seem to be a big issue. Senior year, when a lot of kids actually have the driver's license, can happen junior year too, they actually just come out of the gates and they buy a parking pass instead of buying a bus pass. So the town meeting representative asked, are we properly accounting for, number one, can we charge those fees? Are we properly accounting for them in the revolving fund? And then we have historically always used that revenue as an offset to the student contracted transportation account. And is that correct? So I had provided our attorney, Andy Wah, with a kind of a write-up and a little bit of a history on this, much to that effect that I just indicated. Just for your own sake, last year, Joanna had provided, we received about $33,000 in revenue from just selling the parking passes at Chelmsford High School. And that has, again, historically gone to offset the contracted student transportation. So we asked Andy, number one, is the school committee authorized or are they allowed to basically charge fees? We know that they can for transportation, but we just confirmed that anyway, but for selling the parking passes. Number two, is it allowable to use as an offset to contracted student transportation? And then third, if by chance it wasn't, what would be an appropriate offset to that account? So I did provide a copy of the legal opinion that Andy had provided. And basically, he came back and cited there are two different statutes that govern the school committee's ability to collect fees. One allows you to collect student bus fees, and that certainly can be used to go against the contracted student bus account. The second statute allows you to pay or to assess a fee for parking at the high school, so that certainly is allowable under the statute, and that funding is supposed to go in the revolving fund. But Andy opines that that funding should actually not go against the contracted student transportation, that it should go to offset costs of the maintaining or securing the parking lot at the high school instead. So we do have that, and I'm happy to answer any questions he has for you in this legal opinion. He also provided, I gave you a copy of the report that Joanna had provided, just showing that we did generate the $33,000 last year for the sale of parking fees at the high school. I thought it was helpful. The Department of Revenue actually puts out a spreadsheet that just talks about what allowable accounts school committees can actually maintain when they come to revolving funds, so I put a copy of that account in your packet. But I'm happy to answer any questions on this, and after we have a discussion about it, I actually make 3 different recommendations for you. One is that obviously it is legal and allowable and permissible to assess these fees, and they are an offset to our budget. So I recommend that you continue to do that, both for the bus and for the parking fees. I do recommend that we then just shift the offset and use last year's number, the $33,300, which was collected, as an offset, and show that to be against school security for basically the cost of the security guards at the high school securing the facility, and take that revenue offset, remove it from transportation, so to do that budget adjustment. And then third, because if we did that, technically, if the offset goes against school security, you're gonna have an available appropriation of $33,300 in school security that we need to move back to transportation, because now you're gonna have a deficit in transportation. So it's basically an offsetting journal, or budget appropriation to do that. But I'd be happy to answer any questions on the opinion. Again, I kind of laid out in my memo these 3 recommendations for you. But that would be my advice to the committee at this point in time. And then once we have an opportunity to discuss this here this evening, I would further just, I think the best course of action would be to, I do want to follow up with the town meeting reps in general, because this did come up at town meeting. I think the easiest course of action would be for me to just send an email, like a listserv email to the group, and just let them know that this question did come up last spring. We did follow up on it. This was the legal opinion advice we were given. This is the action that the school committee has taken. You know, we appreciate people bringing forward concerns, and if they have them in the future, you know, always feel free to do that or do them at town meeting. But I want them to feel that they had some closure. So happy to answer any questions. I know, Donna, this was on your waiting list for a while, so you must have been very excited when you saw this come through.
Yes.
But I'm happy to talk about it and answer any questions you have.
Anybody?
No, it was pretty clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's good? All right, so do we need 3 different actions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first one you don't really have an action on. It's
Right.
just me, recommending you continue with the current practice.
Okay.
Action 2 basically just acknowledges that shift. I just wanted to kind of spell it out so
Okay.
that you would know what you were doing. So it's really option 3 is where you'd be making a motion, and it would be a roll call vote, because it is transferring money within the budget. So recommendation 3 is the one you really should motion.
Got it all?
So we just skip 2.
Well, 1 and 2 is basically, if you had any
Okay, no,
discussion,
that's all
or
right. I
if
was
you
just getting through it.
disagreed,
That's all.
but.
Well, 2 is offsetting, putting the parking fees to school security, right? Is that a change?
Oh, you know what, I guess, yeah.
So
you
2
know,
and 3, I think, both have to
Okay.
be moved.
That's
I
fine.
move that we transfer the anticipated revenue from student parking fees in the fiscal year 2019 budget. Approve, I don't know where the flow goes here.
So what account is that going to shift it to?
Yep, so,
It goes from contracted student transportation, which is line item 3300, to school security, which is line item 3600.
Seconds? Anybody?
Second.
Second. Any questions? Okay. Al?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
And just so you know, I did lay that out in the budget sheets that follow, just so you'd have like the graphic display on it.
I move that we approve fiscal 19 local budget appropriation transfer of $33,300 from school security dash supervisor of students to transportation dash regular transportation.
Second.
Any discussion? Al?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you for doing that.
No, you're welcome. I'm glad we get that wrapped up. And you agree with my thought process around just emailing the town meeting reps and
That's great.
bringing closure? Okay.
Now, will you speak at all town meeting and all, or no?
You know, I actually met with Paul this afternoon. We don't have anything on the spring town meeting warrant.
Fall?
Fall town meeting warrant. So I probably will go the first night to just kind of hear what's going on. I'm still working, there were a couple of warrant articles, I'm not sure if they're warrant articles or citizen petitions, that relate to recycling
Right.
and the use of like plastic straws and also styrofoam. So I'm still trying to gauge the impact of that on the schools, so I may have to be there for that portion of it. But we don't actually have any articles that are really school department related outside of that, so I don't have a big speaking role this fall.
That's good.
It's very good.
All right, next, student activity account audit?
Yep, so before you this evening, and I'll start, and then Joanna can certainly jump in. We still only have the draft back of the student activity audit, which we had conducted last spring, but we have been doing a lot of work, Joanna and her staff behind the scenes, of making some recommended changes to the procedure manual. You have been approving different policies related to student activity funds, so we thought it timely to just bring it forward at this particular time. And then once we actually do receive the final audit back from Powers and Sullivan, we'll give you a copy of the final audit report. And then at that point in time too, after we talk through tonight, in the guidelines and on procedures and policies, it's a whole red line version about the changes we're recommending. What we'll recommend doing, I spoke with Joanna this afternoon, we'll give you that final audit, and then we'll actually accept and incorporate all of the changes and recommendations into that document, so it's a clean document. And we'll include that in the packet so that you can actually kind of give it a read through from top to bottom, and it will flow better than the document that you have in front of you today. But we wanted you to be able to kind of see back and forth what was happening. But in a nutshell, student activity funds of our magnitude, the guidelines recommend you have them audited externally at least once every 3 years. So as a practice, what we've talked about doing is 1 year we're going to do the high school audit, the next year we're going to do the middle school audit. So every year we'll do one kind of comprehensive external audit, and we'll just rotate them year to year. We're not going to do the 3-year thing, so we'll do them every 2 years.
When was the last external audit conducted?
On the high school, I want to say it was 2015 or 16.
Before that.
Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, it's on the website.
Okay.
I think it might have said 13 in there.
Is it?
Yeah, 2013, I
13?
think. Yeah, that's what it says in the document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joanna, do you have
It is on the website.
audits prior to that?
Prior to 13?
Yeah.
I'd have to look. I haven't seen it.
I don't know.
They're probably archived on the website.
Okay,
Yeah, I
thank you.
truly don't know. But the cycle that we're gonna get in, obviously fiscal 18 was gonna be the high school audit, 19 we'll do middle schools, and then we'll continue rotating. As you go through this particular document, we had, Joanna, do you wanna jump in for a second, maybe talk a little bit about just how like there were the 2010 guidelines, and then the DOE in 16, and just bring the committee up to speed?
So we had, our base document was a document that was voted on by the school committee in 2010. And that was the last we could find, and Powers and Sullivan could find, that was a voted document. So that was our base document. Then we had, in 2014, DESE put out a guideline document. So we had that document as a resource. And then we had our own policies that you just approved at last meeting as a resource. So what we did is we took the 2010 document as a base and then edited it to include the DESE guidelines and reference the policies you approved in the appendix, and made sure it all was in sync
and that we were having a consistent guideline and policy.
I think if you read through the audit, most of the recommendations pertain to the fact that the last school committee's voted kind of procedure and policy manual was from 2010. The DOE was 2014, did you say? The finance division there gave some guidelines and recommendations around audit. So a lot of the things that are in those guidelines were not in your 2010 policies. So when the DOE or the external auditor comes in to audit you, we didn't have some of the things that they'd be looking for in the document. We were following the 2014 guidance from DOE, but technically it wasn't in line with the 2010 document. One example that came up is like senior class clubs. In the 2010 document, there was really no guidance that said, what do you do with the senior class account after the senior class leaves? And the DOE document from 2014, I believe, said, you know, within, I want to say like, was it 2 years?
Yep.
You need to close out that particular account. So we would be following the DOE guidance, but technically the district document from 2010 didn't have that in there. So we're basically incorporating that in. I think we actually went a little more stringent.
We went with a year.
We said we want to close
We
it
ju-
down within a year.
Yeah, I don't want to wait. There's really no reason to wait that long in that case.
Right. What was one of the other things that kept coming up that wasn't in the, there was another category like that?
I think.
Oh, the closing of inactive accounts.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
So if you had a club, let's say, that just didn't have any activity in it, it was a particular club and it had a balance of $300 or whatnot. If, you know, our policy in 2010 never said what you do with that, it just kind of kept rolling, so you'd have $300 at the end of each year. The DOE guidance are, you know, after so many years of inactivity, I believe it's 3, technically you're supposed to come to the school committee and close the account. So we incorporated that type of language within our procedure document, so the next time that we come out, if we have these inactive clubs, we'll have a process to basically close them. When we bring them before you, we say we're gonna have this be an inactive account, you're gonna vote to move that money just back to the general account or be distributed to other clubs. So we now incorporated that into the to the procedure manual. But again, I think, you know, overall, there was nothing that jumped out at me in this particular audit as concerning. It was more that the school committee's technical guidelines and procedures from 2010 predate when the DOE actually issued an advisory in 2014 of additional policies. So we've now taken the steps of incorporating those recommendations into the revised guidelines. So when you see the final audit, we'll give you those final guidelines that are cleaned up with the track changes removed. You can read through them at that point in time. We'll vote to accept the procedures. Technically, the policies. So technically, you vote to accept the policies. The procedures, you're just going to acknowledge that we have in place. And then we'll actually have that as the working guide for this year when they come in to audit the middle schools. So that's what they'll be able to audit against.
So the policies are what we recently approved from our review.
Correct, and a lot of the policies that you reviewed, we didn't have in place prior, so they also kind of factored into this. So you've done the right thing on the policies.
What happened with that extra money in previous years when there was no policy?
Well, it's still there, it just sits in the account.
Still
but
sitting in there?
Yeah, it's like earmarked for that particular club, but if the
Couldn't
club
do
is
anything.
defunct, it just kind of sits there.
Okay. Did you find a lot of accounts like that?
No, but they're
Okay.
just, you have to have a policy that says how you're gonna deal with them,
Hmm.
even though they're small. That was the only other big thing I could think of.
Right. I agree.
It was the senior class, and some of those senior classes have a lot of money. It was the senior class accounts having like some kind of definitive,
Theater
having
Guild.
the students, really, what's that?
The Theater Guild had a lot of money.
The Theater Guild does, but they run in spurts. You know, they'll do a spend for a show, and then if they have a show, they'll obviously bring in a lot of revenue. But like I said, the senior class, once you have your dues, you pay off all your bills, you're really not supposed to sit on that money. And the students themselves are supposed to make the decision about where the funds go. So you want to be able to kind of work with them, hopefully over the course of that first year that they're gone to college, and figure out what they want to do with the funds, to kind of get them off our books and get them into either a private account to get them spent down or whatnot. But we don't want to be personally responsible after that year for the funding.
I know it's not anything that would really be a policy. When we make the decision, one of these clubs that's no longer around, if the advisor who raised all the money, I think it would be great if we could just ask them if they have, you know, they may be doing another club, for example. I think it would be nice if they, I'd like to have, if I had raised $4,000, I'd like to have a say in it. I know you probably can't keep track of all that, but I think it would be nice if we could do it.
I don't think it's gonna happen, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just saying, so the committee would make the decision where the money goes? Because I think if it's for clubs, I think it should stay probably within those clubs rather than general.
Well, no, it has to stay within the fund.
Okay.
So like,
okay.
this
It
money
doesn't-
has been raised by students, so it needs to stay within the macro level account.
Okay,
But you might have a micro-type club that becomes defunct, that doesn't operate anymore.
Got
We
it.
would then kind of bring that to you. Obviously, like Steve, the club advisor might say what they recommend, but we'll bring the recommendation to you, and then you will basically either vote to approve the recommendation or not.
It's just, like, if somebody had a club that involved trips, and they used to go to Germany, and it's defunct, and they now take them to somewhere else, I think, used as an example, it would be nice if the person who spent all the time raising the money had some input. Just, if it comes up, it might be something to think about, that's all.
I don't think it's gonna come up a lot. I mean, when you looked at there's a laundry list of clubs, and when you looked at them, there weren't that many that were inactive. The bigger issue is just that we didn't have a policy that addressed what to do with them
Yeah.
if they did. And you don't wanna have a particular club sitting year after year after year with unused revenue.
Yeah.
You want it to be reinvested in students.
By the way, seeing I just brought that up, Principal Murray did a great job at Rotary today, talking about all the new developments at the high school.
Oh, good.
Some of which I didn't even know yet. But we apparently are gonna have at least 2 exchanges, one to, France and somewhere else.
Yeah, it's
Which I'm really
Yep.
pleased about, because I've seen what happens with the kids going way back. And I'll just take a moment if you don't mind. My daughter went to Germany when it was still West Germany, which is a fantastic experience. And then she and a friend went back behind the Iron Curtain into Czechoslovakia at that time. And the relationship with the people that they met, and you can get this with almost any of the kids that went on these exchanges, was intense. Her husband, Dan, went on an exchange to Italy, and on that honeymoon, they went to visit the people they stayed with. So these relationships it's not a fly-by-night thing that doesn't have value. That, in my opinion, they have tremendous long-term value. So that's my speech for tonight.
I think Steve's actually coming to the first meeting in
I'm
October.
sorry.
No, but for his presentation, so we can make sure that he addresses it then, too.
Yeah, he had several other things. It was an excellent
Yeah, there's a lot
presentation.
We'll take all of them.
Yeah.
We'll nothing to talk about.
No, he was very good.
Anybody else? Don?
So, one thing I was wondering is, when we reviewed the Melanson Heath audit back in, I think it was maybe May or June,
Yeah.
I thought student activities audit was included in that.
As a recommendation.
I thought they had taken a look at that at the time, student activity accounts. So,
I'll look back.
Okay.
I know they didn't do like a detailed audit like this
right,
on the student activity accounts.
Right.
This is, kind of follows the DOE guidelines about
Okay.
what the external auditor is supposed to specifically look for.
okay.
I'm trying to think, in the Melanson Heath, what the line item on student activities would have been. I wonder if it would have been more of a finding. I will look, because I put that spreadsheet together, but I wonder if it was more of just like a recommendation to have them externally audited every, at least 3 years type thing. I'll look for you.
No, the only reason I mention that is just because if one was done then actually it would mean that we had done one more recently than 2010. But I
wasn't.
don't think it was to that extent,
Right.
right? So,
There might have been like a cursory review,
okay,
but this is like the first real audit you've had
okay, yes,
since the last one.
Might have said that we need to have it audited.
Yeah.
okay. And then the next thing is, in the last meeting, we talked about some of the procedures that we would be exploring for fundraising, and I was wondering, at some point, when we get the final audit and we
Yep.
pull all of this together, if we can pull the whole thing together, maybe in a presentation about these policies and procedures, as well as, how those policies and procedures would impact or be involved in these as well. And then I think that at that point, once we have all of that information, that's when we should have a discussion about fees. Because I think that, I feel kind of bad in many ways that, we haven't had things in place. And I think that it's long overdue. And we have a lot of parents who contribute a lot of money year in and year out to various activities and athletics and whatnot. So I'm glad that we're going to have these policies and procedures in place. I feel bad that it's taken us so long. And I think that once we have all of the pieces, that we need to go back and explore the whole fee structure again. And as Al was talking about at the beginning of the meeting, there's been some concern, I think, from parents about, fees and what can we do to maybe reduce them or eliminate them, or even if it's just an explanation about why they're necessary. I think that would be a really good thing to do at some point down the road.
Yeah, that might not be a bad timeline either, though, but I do just want to let you know, the school district has had, like a procedures and policies manual. It just was dating back to 2010, and it didn't include the updates from 2014 when the DOE issued new guidance. So again, there were policies and procedures being followed, but there were a couple of categories that just weren't identified in either the school committee policies, so we just incorporated that with the MASC review.
Yes.
And even in the procedures manual, again, like closing a defunct account, things like that. It's not that the money wasn't being accounted for, but you potentially might have had a situation where you had a club that was no longer in existence that just continued to have a balance rolling year to year. I don't want anyone to walk away thinking there was something, the money was missing or whatnot.
No,
It just is sitting in that account.
No, and I think it goes back to the meeting that we had, the last meeting that we had where we discussed this. And I think, there's always been questions from parents about, well, why is this money going? Why am I paying $300 in an athletic fee and another $40, another $35, another $50? What is happening with it? And, we talked about some of the ways that we're going to make that whole process more transparent. And I guess that's what I'm referring to is not that necessarily that there was, anything illegal or unethical happening. It's just that I'm not sure that it was clear to parents. And I feel like we're overdue in giving them the explanation that they deserve for where their money's going.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. So if I could speak to the fundraising piece and then just the numbers you see on the list of clubs and their balances. The fundraising you speak of is incorporated in these documents. Your fundraising policy is in Appendix B.
Yep.
And then the fundraising form that each club provides to Principal Murray is included in the packet. So I think we're up to date on that. And all of the revenue in the pages you see on this audit are from fundraising. They're not from the student participation fees.
Right.
That's going to be in the next agenda item when we go over that. But all of this revenue is from fundraising.
Thank you.
I could just add another comment. Lauren Corcoran is now in charge of student activities. And we've had a handbook, but we now really know what's in it because we just started a Rotary Club, it's called Interact. And the paperwork and everything, she's got a schedule for when the rosters have to be done, and all of the forms are in the packet about fundraising and everything else. So I think it's worthy of note that a really serious effort is being made on her part to hold the advisors accountable. I guess that's it.
Great.
Joanna, I checked on the website. There are 2 links to audits for the student activity accounts. They're the same document. So if you could just find maybe 3 prior audits from 2014, August 2014 is the one that's on the website. It's listed twice. So any 3 prior to that would be great. Thank you.
I just want to say I'm glad we're trying to pull it all together, policies, procedures, all that. Is there anything more that we should be doing? Like one of the recommendations is we should be approving student accounts every year, or is that something we should be doing, or, because obviously I don't think we have been doing that.
You technically have, but you don't. It doesn't come before you in a form of a vote.
Okay.
So we've got 2 different areas. Like in the actual, say, teacher's contract, is technically where there is the list. One of the appendices is a list of all the clubs you operate and how much money you're actually paying the advisors. So technically, the school committee is approving the teacher's contract, which is approving the clubs that we're offering and the amount of money that's being paid to the club advisor. So technically, you are voting to approve the contract, so you're approving the appendix. I think in this particular case, let's say you had some of these clubs that just had a rolling balance, that they weren't active, if you now are going to be seeing the audits come forward, and Joanna is going to, on a quarterly basis, now when she provides the regular local operating budget finances, she's also going to be providing the student activity accounts. So you're going to see all those accounts. So technically, when you accept the reports as reports of progress, you'll be accepting the clubs that come before you. You're certainly welcome to.
Yeah, no, I just saw it was one of the recommendations, so that's why.
Yeah, that's the way we talked with both Mike Gilbert from MASC and the auditors, as far as having you basically vote at the meetings to, approve contracts and then also approve of the reports.
Okay.
And the reports will detail that activity.
See you.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Don't hesitate to bring stuff from, from the kids that you want brought up.
I thought you were bringing cookies or something. You wouldn't-
I can tell you, you don't run a club meeting at the high school unless there's food. Seriously, it's the most important thing.
It is.
Gotta have your food, so.
Yes.
I think with regard to this, yeah, donuts are good too. With regard to this, if we just did a motion to approve this as a report of progress, I think that's fine for tonight. And then we get the final audit, and you have the final guidelines, we'll put that on as an additional item.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve this as a report of progress.
Yeah.
On the audits.
On this particular report, on the report presented.
I move that we support, this is the student activity account audit report.
It's just the draft, yeah.
Okay. I move that we approve the draft of the Chelmsford High School student activity account audit.
Is that what you need?
The draft report, yeah, that's fine. As a report of progress.
Second.
Second.
As a report in progress.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Right.
Can I just touch on Barbara's thing for 1 second? On the list of audits that are listed on the page, the fourth one down is just the Melanson Heath audit. That was the global audit for the district. That wasn't specifically the student activity audit.
I just, hold on, I have to get back.
Okay.
It's a Powers and Sullivan, August 29, 2014 is listed twice. It's the only, they're listed as student activity audits.
Okay, because I only have it listed once on my page.
Oh, I have it on twice.
All right, but that's the last
It's the
audit
same
that I
link,
can
so
find that goes back prior to 2006.
we didn't have any audits done prior to that?
You had regular financial audits each year. I don't know.
No, I mean student
Yes,
activity.
I do
account.
not know when you had the student activity audit. We will look in the
Okay.
files, but I just can't guarantee when they were done.
Okay.
So that 14 was probably the 13 audit, and 14 was a report, probably.
I'm looking for like 2007,
Yeah, we will look, and we'll even just talk to, it would have either been Powers and Sullivan or Melanson Heath to conduct them. It
Right.
wouldn't have been another firm. We will ask them
Okay.
to just try to get it, but I'm just saying I might not have it for particular years.
Thank you.
I think we're good. All right, so next, report on McCarthy Park and CHS clubs.
Thank you. All right, so on this particular report, and Joanna, jump in whenever you want, tried to, again, just provide some information that had been requested previously and a little bit of background information on our clubs that operate at McCarthy Park and the high school. So we do offer after-school student clubs and activities at both middle schools and the high school. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoons. They typically begin around Columbus Day and they run until right around after April School Vacation Week, right around that. To participate in the club at the middle school, the fee has historically been $100. I don't know when the last time that's been adjusted. And at the high school, it's $125. Our students at McCarthy and Parker can technically take the late bus. We run a late bus if you participate in the activity and go home. The late bus is not available to the high school. It's only those two middle schools. Laid out for you a couple of things. Last year, just wanted to give you a sense for exactly how much money we took in. If you flip to the spreadsheet, because we have revenue coming in from two different areas. So the students themselves or the parents do pay, again, $100 for middle school, $125 for the high school. So if you look at the top row of your report, you'll see at the high school, $55,400 was generated from students paying that particular fee. At McCarthy, it was $36,000. At Parker, it was $29,000. So we brought in a total of $121,000. Under expenses below, there were expenses that get paid directly from the revolving fund. And there were also, our local budget subsidizes the cost of running the clubs. So we do have line items in the local budget. The takeaways, basically, if you look back to the last paragraph in the, my memo, was that, you know, $121,166 was received as revenue from the students. The labor and the transportation costs, so labor meaning the stipends that we paid out to teachers, and the transportation cost would be for the extra buses, added up to $256,000, almost $250,000 for actually running the programs. Of the total cost, again, $121,591 was supplemented through the local budget. So we actually paid out a little bit more last year than we either brought in or had local budget appropriation for. So had to dip into the revolving fund, the historical revolving fund, for those fees of about $13,500, or $13,400. Just to give you some sense of kind of where those revenues are coming from. At the middle schools, the collections are typically pretty good. So most, if not all, the kids are paying the fee for those clubs. At the high school, the fee participation is good as well, with two exceptions. So there are a number of clubs at the high school which on the list of clubs I coded in green. These are clubs that are required, if a student enrolls in a particular class during the school day, they're required to participate in the club after hours. So they don't pay a fee because it's part of the requirement for being in the course during the school day. So that is largely the band. So if you're in the band during the school day, you need to be part of the band after school hours. The orchestra is another one, and then there's a choir and mock trial. So if you take the, I forget the name of the class, Linda, the mock trial class?
It's the.
Oh, they actually call it mock trial
yeah.
class? That's a good name for it.
It's a
So
good one.
if they
You
take
can remember it,
that
it's
club
easy.
during the day, they're required to do the mock trial after school. So those kids don't pay to participate. The other group are coded in yellow. So again, we try to collect fees from these particular students, but it is problematic because these are volunteer club opportunities or their designations. So like if someone gets designated to be in the National Honor Society, then technically it's a student activity and we try to collect a fee from the child, but it's often hard to say, congratulations, you're in the National Honor Society, we'd now like $125 for your participation. Similarly, we have a lot of student community service organizations, so like our peer mentors. You know, if you're an upperclassman and you want to be a mentor to the freshmen, again, that's a club, so you have to pay to volunteer your time. It's odd, quite honestly, and, you know, we try to collect funds from that, but we're not always successful, and there's really not a hammer to kind of get the money in, because number one, you're giving someone a special designation, it's a reward, and secondly, what are you gonna tell them they can't volunteer their time if they don't pay, so that can become problematic. We just wanted to quantify for you, you know, what the actual cost of running those, you know, kind of required clubs and community service clubs, and it was about $33,000 last year is what the stipends cost to run those particular clubs. And again, that's only at the high school level. We don't have that required clubs or community service clubs at the middle school level, so it's not quite the issue there. That's kind of a nutshell. Joanna, did you want, oh, go ahead.
So, no, I just have a question on the clubs. Would you not designate Best Buddies as a community service one in yellow as well?
I'll be quite honest with you, not knowing specifically what all these different clubs are.
Okay.
I got this list from the high school.
Okay,
If you wanted to give me any clubs in question, I'd be happy to go back to them and kind of ask for clarification.
yeah, sure.
They had just coded these for me.
Yep, Best Buddies, freshman class advisor, all the class advisors, because I think that those are, your student representatives, and they're involved in helping, helping the school. I mean, they're involved in organizing their class for Spirit Week and doing fundraisers and whatnot, so that way, you know, when it comes time for the prom, the class gift, all of these other expenses, that they have money set aside for that.
Are you speaking to the advisor position or to
No,
the
this is
students
actually,
involved in
so
that?
I
what
don't know,
it's
I'm
called,
not sure
though,
really why it's called
unfortunately.
student.
It's called-
Yeah, it's student
called
class,
student reps.
Called
yeah.
freshman class advisor, but it must be
Right.
the freshman class executive board, you know?
No,
Gov-
yeah, and then
student
student
government,
council
yeah.
would be another one.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes, not a great name.
Yeah, these are just the names that come right from the contract book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and student council would be the last one, another one.
I
that-
can go back to the high school and ask them to clarify,
Yeah.
but the data you have before you is based on the greens and yellows
Okay,
that are coded on this particular sheet.
all right. So I understand that they're supposed to pay the money, but we don't necessarily enforce it. Is that correct?
I don't know what you want to call enforcement. I mean, we hound, you know, we try to collect funds from these kids. There are some of these kids that do not pay. Linda?
So I know what you're saying, because at times it was difficult, because I don't think it was clear as who was collecting the funds.
Okay.
So was it the advisor, or was it not? But I know that that's been clarified, that the
Okay.
advisor is to collect the funds, and if students don't pay, then they won't be able to participate, and that would, you know, go to another level. It's not the advisor's job to, you know, banter back and forth with the
Sure.
student, but they would then report, here, I have these 3 names, these are students that say they'd like to be part of this, but, you know, they're not paying, so then that goes to another level. So that has been tightened up. I would have to say in the past 2 years at least. I can vouch for that, because it was a little awkward for the advisors at first. They're like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing, but
Sure.
we made that clear.
So I think we had talked about this before, you know, should we designate certain activities that are in the service of the school or in the service of the community as not needing to have to pay a fee? You know, I mean,
We've done that for some of them,
Well, you
like the
have,
National Honor Society like, there was several of them that they went through, and they made that determination.
well, this is what they're recommending.
Okay.
This is what the high school's recommending. The greens basically don't pay because they were, again, the extension of the course during the school day. The high school is saying the yellows historically have been difficult to collect
Okay.
because they're the
Thanks.
community service
and I,
clubs.
as I said, I would look into these other ones as well, but I, you know, I don't do, you know,
I think you're saying there's a net benefit to others because of the clubs, right?
Right.
Like
Or to the school.
or
To
the
the school,
community,
yeah.
right? So maybe shouldn't require a
And
fee.
it also is not beneficial to those students who can't afford it, and they're trying to build a resume to get into a college, and that makes us a better community, that they go to college, and we would want to
Yeah.
encourage that.
What do we do about students that can't afford the fees? That's a good
Yeah, they were, I
point.
mean, you know,
Well,
we
the
really can't.
easiest standard is qualification for lunch.
Yeah, that's the easiest one, but there are options,
others.
and there's things that they do for students, you know, that are struggling with that. They have a good idea of who those students are, and then also if they believe that'd be a good benefit for them to be part of that club.
In all, whether it's, I can vouch for this, sports or activities, if you know, they can take care of it. The problem is, if you don't know, if they
Right.
don't tell you
Right.
somehow.
Because some kids may not even look at it. They may just say, I'm not even gonna
Yeah.
bother because I don't have the cash.
Right.
Right.
You have to know.
Yeah, I think there's a great value, you know, with these clubs and obviously getting as many kids to participate as possible. There's finding that fine balance between, we still need to provide the stipends and the budget to be able to support these clubs. And, you know, basically, I mean, rough math without looking back at the paragraph, it's basically like a half and half type proposition. You know, we're paying out about $250,000 a year in clubs. We're taking in 125 or a little less than half of that. And our local budget is basically subsidizing the rest. So it's almost like a 50-50 kind of cost share at this point between students paying to be able to participate and the local budget paying and supporting the clubs in global terms. You know, I do get the difficulty in, again, some of those community service clubs, you know, if it was my own child and they got, hey, you know, congratulations, you're gonna be National Honor Society, now we need a fee from you. That's a little awkward. I'm not gonna say that it's not, but typically that has been basically what the revenue source to be able to pay the fees to provide the
no, and I understand, and I think that this is something that we need to really take a hard look at. I mean, you know, again, I'll go back to the, it's not freshman class advisors, freshman class, say, representatives.
One other thing,
Yep,
Madonna,
sorry.
and I mean to cut you off.
Yep.
One thing that we do, you know, we certainly can look at this year too, when it comes to the data piece on this. There are a lot of kids who are duplicates, so, or like, so they are paying to be in the musical or a club that's a true paid club. They also happen to have gotten the National Honor Society distinction. So obviously, you're paying the 125, you
for.
qualify for
right.
anything. So
Right.
3 days a week at club or whatnot. Some of those kids, even when we look at the list of like who may have paid, who may not have, will pop up as if they paid for the club, but they very well may have taken or participated in a club that was actually a fee-based club. So
Right.
they technically provided the stipend for the year.
Okay, and I think that that's a very important
Yeah.
piece of information, that, if you pay the $125, you're good to go. You can, for anything.
Right, there's overlap. I
Right,
guess.
exactly. But, I think my point was going to be, if you're a freshman class representative, and, you're tasked with, providing the school spirit for, your class at, Spirit Week and doing fundraising and things like that, and then you have to pay $125 to be in the service of the school, it just seems not right.
I'll give you a good example. A friend whose child is on the yearbook. Instead of paying $120 whatever dollars being a yearbook, and then they have to buy the yearbook at the end of the year for $125. So they're working all year to put together the yearbook, and then they have to buy it. So, whether they could waive the fee for the yearbook for the person or waive the activity fee, I mean, because they're working for their classmates putting together this yearbook, and,
Right.
Yeah, I think these are the kinds of things, I don't know, it just bothers me, to be perfectly honest with you, that, we have kids, doing things for the community and for the school, and then we charge them for that.
I guess the only other thing we would have to take into consideration, I'm not saying this isn't worth considering, it's a valid conversation to have, is if fees are removed, whether this is at the high school or the middle school level from certain clubs, would the participation become such that we then have to add additional stipends for additional staff? Because more kids than we anticipated now want to sign up for the class. So as far as supervision goes, we've actually got to add staff onto it. That would be an additional cost that we would just have to keep in the back of our minds.
Not that it's a bad thing if more kids want to get involved in
No,
community
it's
service.
not, but it's just going to be,
I
no,
think
not
that's
for
one of the-
community service, but let's say it was one of the other, clubs or something. That's the hard part.
Well, I don't want to belabor the point, I do think that as we pull all of this together.
Right.
I
Now
think,
you at least have the data, too.
right, exactly. I think that, we have to take a hard look at this. I mean, I think that, the cost of everything is going up.
Right.
And I think if there's an opportunity to be able to save families some money and provide kids with an opportunity to get involved in something that's not going to cost them anything, if we can do that, then I think it's worth exploring.
Anybody else? Great, thank you. All right, next year is the 10-year capital plan update.
All right, so update for you on kind of where we are with the capital plan. We've got a bunch of different moving parts, and have the Doran Whittier portion of this evening. So as you recall, we went through the whole Doran Whittier presentation. At one of the facility subcommittees we had over the summer, and then I believe it was reported out at one of the summer school committee meetings, we had taken the Doran Whittier report and broken it down into several different sections. So I just went through and kind of added a little header and a little description that talked about the amount of work that quantifies off of the Doran Whittier report.
Yes, thank you.
Did I do something wrong?
No, it's excellent, keep going.
So,
Good job.
thank you. The first one was completed work. So, using the Doran Whittier calculations, about $6.2 million was work either already appropriated, in progress, or being done under town capital, things along those lines. So that work was excluded from this. $2.8 million of work to be performed over the 10 years was smaller projects that were considered general maintenance that are going to be rolled into just the town kind of regular operating budget and maintaining the schools. And then there were the three categories that we were really mostly concerned with right now. High priority needs, which were flagged as things that should be performed within the first 1 to 3 years of the program. There were about $1.9 million worth of projects there. Medium priority, which would be 4 to 6 year fixes, that was $1.8 million. And then we had about $10.1 million in Category 3, the lower priority, but still needed to be done within 7 to 10 years. Those are the three spreadsheets that I'll speak with in a minute. Lastly, there was a category, as we went through all the different schools and reports, there was some themes that were emerging around building envelope type work. So, and when you quantify them, because we didn't know if it would necessarily qualify for capital, because a lot of the projects were smaller in nature, but just the number of them, taken cumulatively, may qualify for some kind of capital project. There were about $6.5 million worth of, say, building like a crack in say a foundation or a wall that could be sealed better to prevent water from coming in, which would lengthen the use of the facility, things along those lines. What we're recommending on this particular funding source, because again, to find any economy of scale, you'd have to group those projects together. We're actually going to recommend that we allocate a little bit of money, not this evening, but at a future meeting, to hire some type of an engineer consulting type group to come in, take the Dora Whittier report, go through all of those recommendations and figure out if there's a way to kind of pack them together into projects and help develop bid specifications that could go out to bid to maybe take care of, say, elementary needs in a particular area 1 year, middle school needs, high school needs, whatnot. But there are $6.5 million of what we call building envelope type needs that still need to be addressed. There were a significant number of projects, about $34 million worth of projects, that we're actually not recommending moving forward at this time. These were by and large, if, and depending on which major new school construction project we were to undertake, would kick in. So for instance, if you were to ever knock down one of our existing schools, there's obviously asbestos within the schools that has to be abated and removed. It is not hurting the buildings now, it's not part of the ADHERA plan, but if you were to knock down a school, Parker, McCarthy High School, whatnot, you're gonna have some asbestos that has to be removed. That number's been quantified, but it's in the $34 million figure. So we're obviously not gonna tackle that in the 10-year capital plan because that would only kick in if we actually did new school construction. There were also other issues as far as code compliant type things. Where our buildings are fully in code, they're up to code now, there aren't any issues. But if you actually ever went and did a major addition or remodeling, they would kick new codes in. So obviously that isn't something that we did. An example of this would be, do you remember last year when we were doing the work on the modular classrooms? If we had attached the modular classrooms to the actual 3 elementary schools where they're detached, it kicked in the code requirement to add sprinklers to the entire building. Well, our buildings aren't sprinklered, so we didn't want to do that because then that triggers millions of dollars worth of sprinklers. So those kind of things are in that list of no action recommended right now because they wouldn't kick in unless you did a larger project. And then there are a list of $8.5 million worth of projects which we're still verifying in the field between DPW, our facility staff, and Dora Whittier to figure out, should they be general maintenance, should they be things that either have already been done, what kind of priority would go on them. In this $60+ million worth of project, there was some field work that needed to be required. So here's how I've done this for you. This evening, you have the Dora Whittier reports, the low, medium, the high impact projects, broken down how I best see it on those spreadsheets. So if you look at your first spreadsheet, this is a high priority, years 1 to 3 capital projects. You've got the school on the left, the area of the building that's affected in the second column, a little description of the scope of work, the estimated project cost, and then I basically have gone through and just broken out year 1, 2, and 3, and tried to basically even those costs across the 3 years. So if we had, $1.8 million, $1.9 million, I was looking to have about $600,000 of work to be done each year because this is work that has to get factored into the town's capital plan. So we don't really have the ability to say we're going to do $2 million one year and nothing the next. So I've gone through the projects. We've actually looked to see which would make sense to do together, which might make sense to actually kind of do one school 1 year, one school the next. So this is kind of my work with Brian and Facilities to kind of sprinkle out those projects to have it make sense over the 3 years. You then get into the medium priority projects. Again, we have another 3 years, and you'll see about another $600,000 or so worth of projects in years 4, 5, and 6. And then the last set of projects are I don't like how we call them low priority, they're just lower priority, and they're the 7 to 10 year category. So this again was $10 million, so you will see that the number of each year bumps up to about $2.5 million worth of projects. And again, this is something that has to be taken into consideration with the larger kind of school building plan, because there are items that appear in years 7, 8, 9, 10 that are going to potentially differ based on if we were to do a new school project. One example here, which I highlight for you, and I just kind of coded it in red on your sheet, is there is an item in year 7, it says replace the portable classroom units at Parker for $75,000. Obviously, $75,000 is not going to replace the portables at Parker, but that is intended to be the fee that you basically pay the consultant to come in to assess the existing portables, talk about design for new classrooms, but we need to know kind of what's going to happen. We don't need to know right now, but we need to kind of be thinking about 7 years from now. Are we going to be doing something with McCarthy? Are we going to be doing something with Parker? How that all relates. But I think it's important to have on the plan so that we remember that we've got to make some decisions about those. So again, as you go through these spreadsheets for tonight, and I know it's a lot of information, you're not being asked to, say yes or agree or whatnot. I just wanted to kind of walk you through how I've laid this out. I laid out some kind of next steps for you to take a look at. Again, step 1 was I've divided and sorted these projects, and I'd like you to be able to take an opportunity to kind of see how we prioritize this work over the first 1 to 10 years gets completed. The next step after this, myself and Brian at Facilities will be meeting with Town DPW because there was an existing capital plan for the schools. We need to meet and take a look at any of the outstanding projects that were on that particular list, make sure they're either on this list and we've reprioritized them, or if there's anything omitted, we want to make sure that we add that. And if we add that to these lists, I'll color code it so that it stands out, so you'll see Durham Whittier will say in black, and the town capital was in blue or red or something. I'll have it jump out at you so that you can see that. We'll be doing that over the course of the next week or so because there's not a lot left to be done. So we'll incorporate that into this particular list. We will then bring that to you probably at the October 4th meeting, so probably at your next October 2nd meeting, and actually present that as our 10-year capital plan because we want to get ready for the capital planning meetings that are going to kick in this fall. And then that'll be, kind of our short-term look at what we should be doing with facilities. I'll probably that night on point number 3 for next steps also bring in a recommendation to put a scope of work together to bring in a consultant to take a look at those building envelope projects. Because that is not something that we're going to address at town meeting this fall, but we at least need to start doing the legwork on so that we can quantify and identify how significant those projects are going to be. Item 4, again, we need to just do some work on the longer-term capital plan. So, and this takes into consideration, what are we going to be looking at in a new building? And I just highlighted here that Parker situation for us. So right now, we've applied to the MSBA for the 2nd year for the high school project. We need to kind of have some dialogue about, how long we want to keep that application going. If it doesn't look like, and we'll probably set up a meeting with the state to talk about that as well, but if it doesn't look like in the next couple of years that project has a chance of being successful, what do we want Plan B to be? And Plan B might take into consideration our middle schools. And then how is that going to affect the McCarthy module classrooms, the Parker module classrooms? We need to have that talk because that's really going to be what I'm kind of counting the long-term plan, so the 10-year plus plan. And then that will be timely, so if we have that discussion this fall leading into the winter, by the time we come around this spring to again submit the MSBA application for our larger priority project, we'll need to do that. We're also going to look at the accelerated repair program. So the MSBA has the two, not competing, but they run parallel programs. One is for the kind of the new school remodeling school project program, and the other one is the one that they call accelerated repair. So you can qualify even if you have a larger project ongoing for, say, the high school, for roofs or windows or boilers, and we have a couple of roofs that are going to need some work over the next year or so. So we will actually apply possibly to the accelerated repair program this coming spring at the same time we do a larger project. So I think our goal between now and the winter really has to be to kind of get this on paper and document for the committee and the community where we see this short and long-term plan going. But I at least wanted to convey this to you this evening, kind of let you know that, we have been working on it. There's a lot of work that's actually gone into it. We're probably at about the 90% point at this point. We just need to incorporate those final town capital projects in, and then come back to you at that next meeting with the overall plan. But happy to answer any questions. Again, just wanted to get this in your hands.
When we'll be putting together the list of our recommendations for the capital planning meetings coming up.
Well, if you approve the plan,
Okay.
technically, it would be the year 1
Okay.
is what we would include into that capital.
Okay.
So if you look at the high priority,
Yes.
fiscal 20 projects.
Yep.
would be what we would actually apply for in this year. Now,
Okay.
again, we need to go back and just make sure we add any of the town things in.
Right.
But that's what we would be doing.
Okay.
The kitchens are in that bad a shape, huh? Seems like almost all kitchens.
There's a lot of, years 1 and 2 are a lot of the code type things.
Yeah.
So the kitchens are older because we haven't invested a lot of money, particularly at the elementary school level, in the kitchens because we were doing the preferred meal program. So you didn't have to actually cook on site. And I don't think we're gonna be, in talking to Joanna and Nancy, probably over the next 10 years, reinstating a lot of actual cooking in the kitchens at the elementary level. The commissary program, which we'll talk about in a little bit, being produced out of the high school, has been excellent. The meals at the elementary level so far surpass what we have done the last couple of years.
I'd like to point out you've gotten rave reviews from Ella Moses.
It's unbelievable. No, I'm glad about that. Every.
Oh, you would have heard about it if she
No,
complained.
the kids have been really liking it.
Yeah.
I looked at a sandwich there last week a couple of times, and I
I
wanted to
tell
have
you,
myself.
it was real, it looked awesome. It's very appealing.
Yeah. She buys
So
lunch a
we'll-
lot more now, so she's.
Yeah, no, and Joanna will talk about that. The lunch numbers just in the first 2 weeks of school are up significantly over last year's. But
Yeah,
that
so-
will be something, I think it's nice to have the quality control and your newest equipment kind of at the high school, and producing and sending out to the 4 schools. And really, if you have an opportunity, go through and take a look at them. When Nancy comes to do her demonstration or a presentation to the school committee, we'll actually have her bring some meals so you can take a look at them. They're excellent.
She was at South Row last night for the PTO meeting and gave a very nice presentation.
She did?
Yes.
Oh, good.
So if we're not gonna be leveraging the kitchens, though.
Well, no, so the issues that you're seeing in the kitchens, they're largely code type things. So in a lot of our schools at the elementary and even the middle school level, a lot of like the work surfaces are wood, and really now they're supposed to be stainless steel. So a lot of it is like changing that out. It's changing the serving line out, not necessarily putting like big commercial ovens in or, cooking type equipment, but it's a lot of the other code type things.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? No?
Have the tennis courts been removed from capital totally?
No, they're on the town capital somewhere. And about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we did that kind of recoding of the ones at the high school. It looked good for a year or so, but I was there a couple weeks ago, and there's already grass coming back up through some of the cracks. So I'll find out for you, but like that will eventually get included in here for you.
My people told me to look.
My people.
Your people?
Okay. Anybody else?
No.
Great,
So more will be coming.
thank you.
I think if you have a chance over the next couple of weeks, this list obviously isn't gonna change, and this is, again, 90% of it. So if you get a chance to kind of just scan the first couple of years and make sure you're online, when I add the town stuff in, I'll color code it so it jumps out at you. But ideally, we would love to get at least a tacit approval at the October meeting, because we'll use that to start preparing our documents for town meeting.
And these are all in the Dropbox too, right? All these?
Yeah, correct.
Under the capital plan stuff?
Yeah, if you want to really get into the detailed list, I kind of prettied it up a little bit,
Yeah.
but all of the documentation is there for you.
Sure.
Good.
Good.
All right, next, school committee presentation schedule?
Yep, just wanted to pass this along too as well. We're going to be starting next month, actually, with the various school and departments coming at each school committee meeting to perform a little presentation for you. The first, we've asked them to do about a 15-minute overview, PowerPoint, something goal-oriented that's going on in their building this year, a project that they're working on that they're really proud of to present on, and then allow about a 10-minute question and answer period. So we'll start each school committee meeting for the first 20 minutes to half an hour of having an individual school or department presentation. I just listed them for you. Obviously, these are all the major schools and departments. We will integrate into the schedule in some of our school committee meetings additional presentations, like Bill and Technology will come in around the holidays. We're going to be laying out a technology initiative, so that'll be added to the agenda. But these are kind of the steadies, so that over the course of the year that you see at least each of the schools and departments for one significant presentation. So no action, just letting you know so that you can kind of forecast what's coming.
Great.
Any questions? All right.
SEL?
Yeah, next meeting, at the August 7th school committee meeting, we had brought forward a recommendation to change the coordinator of school guidance position that was formerly held by Mr. Wright, and make it a coordinator of social emotional learning and counseling services. So obviously, the timing was a little bit tough, going back to the school in August to be advertising for this type of a position. We've had a few individuals apply, we've had some interviews, and just have not found the right candidate yet. There have been a number of people who've expressed interest and who've applied, who don't have the administrative license. When we posted this particular position, we advertised, or I guess, let me back up. The pool of candidates that we would typically see for a position like this would be like a school guidance counselor, a school psychologist, clinical psychologist, social worker, someone like that. They obviously have a license in their particular field, but as part of their regular work, they wouldn't normally have an administrator license. So they wouldn't normally have like a supervisor director license or a school building administrator license or something like that. So it has been challenging. People hold their regular license, but they don't have the admin license. So what we're basically recommending to you this evening is in the job description that we attached, and I just included the bullets in red. We'd like to modify it to open up the pool and expand it a little bit. To number one, require that they have DESE licensure in their related field of work. So if you are a psychologist or a social worker or a guidance counselor, you have to obviously have a valid license in that particular field. But that if you don't possess an administrator's license, we did still say that that's preferred, as long as the candidate was willing to work towards and is eligible to receive their administrative license, that we would consider them for the position. So it's really an effort to be able to re-advertise, expand the pool a little bit, and look at some additional candidates, just given the time of year that we're at. The licensure issue is a local issue. It's really a local control type issue. It's not a requirement from DESE. And so that's our recommendation to be able to move forward at this time. Basically, a recommendation to allow us to amend the job description that I previously provided to include those two caveats.
Questions? In the interim, how we've been handling that, what Tom used to do?
Different people have just stepped up and kind of taken on little different pieces of the role. Obviously, this is an important position.
Right.
We want to get it filled, but it's worthwhile trying to get the right person in the job. Again, a little bit of everyone has stepped up. Katie Sims has really stepped up significantly. She was kind of the counterpart with Tom rolling out a lot of the SEL work in the district. She's really taken the lead on that. The guidance counselors themselves at the high school and the school counselors and the other levels have stepped up, and they've really done a wonderful job. We owe them a lot of credit. But I think it's just a little bit of a roadblock that we have right now.
Entertain a motion?
I move that we amend the job description for the coordinator of social emotional learning and counseling as presented.
I just have a quick question, I'm sorry. It says here that the possession of an administrator's license is preferred, but they will be overseeing people. That would make them a peer, wouldn't it, to the people they're overseeing? If the guidance counselors don't necessarily have an administrative licensure, and this person doesn't either, they're basically going to be evaluating their peers.
Potentially could happen. They're not going to be in the same bargaining unit. So, like the guidance counselors or whatnot, they're in the teacher's bargaining unit.
Mm-hmm.
This person would be in the administrator's bargaining unit.
But they're not licensed as an administrator. Is
No, I
that
know, but that's what I'm
typical?
saying. It's a local issue about what licensure you require. We would want the person to apply and to work towards that licensure.
So
but
it's a waiver.
Technically, if we don't require it, we wouldn't even need to seek a waiver on it. Like, if we left it the way that it was now, and we wanted to fill a position and a person didn't have the license, we would need to seek a waiver to be able to hire them. Under this, we technically wouldn't need to seek a waiver if we're not requiring it as part of the job description.
I feel like we're,
I know what you're saying, but
yeah,
the
I feel like
problem
we're
is
lowering
opening
our
the-
expectations.
Well, we're not lowering our expectations with regard to the candidate. It's just that these particular roles, even if you look at our existing staff, like you think someone who might want to eventually like step up for a position, our existing like guidance staff or counseling staff don't have administrative licensure. You wouldn't think of getting it unless you were actually going to be kind of going for that kind of a position.
Work with them to get that.
What's that?
We would work with them to get that licensure.
How long does that take?
Right.
It depends on which one they're going for. I mean, technically, this would be more of a supervisor director license, so it's a matter of hours rather
As a
than
supervisor director, can they perform evaluations?
supervisor director, and then the other one is principalship, but it depends on what they've already had for licensure prior to that. My suggestion would be supervisor director.
Okay.
I mean, it could be like a supervisor, I mean, a
I would-
principalship or.
I would feel more comfortable if we have the language requiring them to obtain the licensure director, supervisor, within a period of time.
I hear what you're saying. The only problem is we don't know
What they have a background.
what they have as a background. Like if I got hired for the job and I've been in my particular role for so long, and I may have done extra duties that only require me to do A, B, and C to get the license. Or if someone doesn't have that, it could be the difference of 3 months or 6 months or a year. That's our
Maybe
only
they could
issue.
take
We wouldn't
coursework.
know. It could
It'd be
potentially be a
coursework, like they might
coursework.
say you need to take a course in this, right? When we apply for our licensure, if you're missing some requirement beyond just the hours, they're gonna ask you to take a course, so that's gonna be subject to what university's offering it, when that rotation comes around, so if it's only a fall course and somebody's hired now, they're not gonna be able to even take it until the fall of such and such. Hopefully, at that point, they have most of their coursework done, but if it's an additional administrative course, they might have to take it, and we would have to provide that for them. But I hear what you're saying about, like, yeah, let's not let this just be ongoing, but our goal would be to make sure that everybody receives licensure, and we would work with them to get to that point.
We
We
could
put
have them
that-
include that in their
Yeah, I want the language. in-
evaluation,
Yeah,
well,
like
I
their
mean,
lic-
in their teach point goals.
Yeah.
Right, that they're.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and so then we have a way of monitoring, how much progress they're making.
Yeah.
And ways to be able to hold them
Right,
accountable.
It could be like an assessment, like, an observation course that they're missing. We could send them to,
Right.
RBT and have them take the courses that way. So it's just a matter of where they came from, what they're coming with, and where we just need to get them to.
Right.
Obviously, you have to have a master's degree. Most people applying for these jobs would have a master's degree. That would be, required.
So
And
when-
it's not to say you wouldn't get an applicant that has the licensure, right? It's just you're opening it up so you can get more
No, we're
candidates.
still saying it's preferred if you actually have it.
Yeah.
But that if we just, a second time around, if we don't get licensed candidates that fit,
Yeah.
that we want to be able to expand that pool
So you
and
could see
look at
more
other people.
what's
Yeah.
out there, right?
So as part of this person being evaluated, one of their goals would have to be that they pursue this licensure.
It's not my concern how they're evaluated. My concern is that they're evaluating peers.
They're evaluating peers in terms of credentials, but not in terms of position, correct?
No?
Yeah.
They would be evaluating the guidance counselors, right?
But their role would be as an administrator, not as a guidance
They
counselor.
aren't licensed to be administrator. You see, this is the problem I have.
Is there a state requirement?
That's where it's a local issue.
Right.
So there's no state requirement for administrators to have this particular license?
No, I think what Barbara's saying is that, let's say you have equally credentialed people, and one is hired as an administrator. They are now evaluating someone with the same credentials, so
Who now
essentially
wants to
their
be-
colleague,
Right.
all right, their peer, credentially, okay, but not in terms of position.
Still their supervisor.
Correct.
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 Yeah, it'd be like if you, got a supervisory role. I think a couple of things that come to mind. I mean, obviously, we would provide them with the necessary courses to do evaluations, right? We wouldn't just send somebody in like, hey, good luck, let's see how this works for you. So we would provide them with that evaluation piece and a mentor. They would be in a different bargaining unit. I'm thinking that most people reapplying for this job or doing anything like that would not be somebody who was like, hey, I just hope I can do guidance or SEL at the school level. It's probably someone who is already going for licensure. They just might need that extra course or 150
Oh, no,
hours
I
towards
understand what you're
that.
saying. Is there, so it doesn't necessarily matter what order they get their license, their administrator's license or their evaluation or?
Well, no, I mean, I think they would go concurrently, so they'd probably be working towards the administration licensure, but to do that, one of the courses might be teaching, like we used to call it the old OATS course, I don't know what they call it now, but like through research and better teaching, they have the analyzing and observing teaching. So they would be doing it concurrently, and that takes, through that course, a couple of months.
Can
And we
we,
would give them a mentor on top of it to make sure that somebody else is putting some eyeballs on what they're doing and what their write-ups would look like.
They don't have to be the only person on the evaluation team.
Correct, we could have all the
Right.
principals are on the
Right.
evaluations.
So they would not be the only person, and as a matter of fact, I would imagine as they're working through this process, you would have someone probably helping them through that and also signing off on the evaluation.
Part of the mentoring program for the administrators is that you have to do an observation with that person.
how do you foresee language in the posting that would indicate that they would be required to become an administrator or to take licensing?
I put that in there.
Okay.
It just says candidate, so it says Mass DESI Administrator's License preferred.
Preferred.
Candidates meeting all of the requirements willing to apply for and fulfill the requirements necessary for Mass DESI Administrator's licensure while serving in the role will be considered for employment.
I want to punch up that preferred. Like, they shall.
You what?
They shall be on a course to become an administrator. Not just, we prefer you.
No, it says you.
No, it's
they
preferred that
the
we want
license.
somebody's
I'm
licensed,
preferring
that's our
just the
first person.
administrative
Yeah,
license.
it's the red, you can see it better.
I don't
red.
see red.
Yeah, I know, you can't see it red. It's the red are the
Like,
changes.
we're still saying that if you actually have the license, that's preferred. But
However-
secondarily,
It's gonna give you,
candidates meeting all the other requirements
Okay,
willing to apply for, and they
Okay.
have to fulfill it.
okay. I'll just be checking on it.
Okay. All right, so we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, 5-0.
Thank you.
I have a question. Are we gonna repost the position with this now?
So we're gonna re-advertise, yeah.
Okay. Before starting that, from the previous posting, do we have any viable candidates left?
Oh, well, I mean,
No, I was gonna say-
technically, there are some people who applied who weren't licensed, so, but we'll cast a new net. So we'll do
Yeah.
a new advertisement. Anyone that did previously apply, we'll send an email to just say that, we're revising the job description. If you're still interested and you fulfill the
apply.
requirements, please, re-acknowledge or resubmit your application.
What do you think we're talking about in terms of projected completion of this thing? Yeah.
I'm gonna guess we're gonna post it for about 2 weeks, 10 days.
Yeah, usually you
About
take
2 weeks. So tomorrow, we can probably provide you an update at the next school committee meeting.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll
We'll
refresh
roll in.
people's, their search engine. So most people have signed up in School Spring that are looking for jobs.
Yeah.
If this pops up again as a new job, it will pop into the new search engine. You might capture some of the people that were like, I wasn't quite sure originally, but like, wow, this is still there. They're on the fence. All of a sudden, you start filling the advertisement because those people that were on the fence weren't quite sure, or they said, forget it, I'm not licensed at all. I
Right, that's what
can't-
I was thinking.
I need
Gonna-
another month,
yeah.
and I can't do this at all.
Right.
If they're gonna be this, stringent on it, so you will get a different pool,
Yeah.
as well as anybody that was on that pool that said, oh, heck, I'm just gonna put it in anyway, because
I actually think
want
that's what's
to.
gonna happen, is you're going to get people who probably said, no, I don't have my license.
Yep.
Maybe in process of getting their license right now and say, great.
They
well,
were on vacation.
Right, so-
There's a whole lot of things that go on, or they were like, oh, geez, how can I leave my current position, or now they're ready.
We're caught in a little bit of a catch-22 in that we have new social emotional programs going and talk of.
We still have
of-
Katie Sims, though. I mean, she's the, in charge of wellness, so she really is stepping up for that piece. I mean, it's not as if that part falls apart.
I don't think it's gonna fall apart. It's just that we want, at the same time, to have the best possible candidate long-term. But the sooner they can come on board and deal with all this, I'm not questioning the ability of Katie or anyone else. It's just,
Right.
this is the person that's gonna own it, so.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
All right, updates on ongoing projects and initiatives.
Yeah, thank you. Dennis and a couple different committee members had asked for some updates to some of our initiatives, so we just put this on as a report. Joanna, do you maybe want to just give the update on the food service?
Sure. So as a reminder, we are bringing meals to the elementary schools. They're being made in the high school commissary. We talked about that in June, and you approved all the equipment and the little van. So in the first 9 days, comparing last year to this year, we've served 1,100 more meals, which is a great start out the gate. And the meals have been pretty popular. The Power Pack seems to be the most popular, with the grain, fruit, or vegetable and a protein. And there's other hot meals, sandwiches, and salads. And then the next, again, we'd like to thank the staff at the high school for stepping up to all this, and at the elementaries, as well as the principals and the teachers for getting the meal counts and then giving us their feedback for enhancements to the program. And then next will be the rollout of breakfast, and we just wanted to kind of get through this first, and we'll be doing that between mid-October and December, and Nancy's working with the principals and the staff on that rollout. It'll be a staggered rollout. It won't be breakfast at all schools one day mid-October. It'll be a rollout.
How's it going with the deliveries, getting things to schools on time?
It's getting, she can get there.
Yeah. Just the traffic in town is
Yeah.
crazy, that's why I think.
Yep, they're just working out the timing of getting the meal counts there and getting it all packed up and getting it out, but so far, so good.
Yeah, it really has been a vast improvement. If you do have a chance to just take a peek at them, but we will have her in, but the options are great. I think the freshness, they're very appealing, the lunches. I know she's been very receptive to taking feedback from schools around menu items, and she's really working very hard, Nancy, and the food service staff, so.
Chicken and waffles has been popular in the Moses household, just so you know.
Chicken and waffles.
Yeah, there's chicken and waffles on the menu one day, I don't know.
She could just come and be a food critic.
Yeah, she
you
could
know,
come in,
have her come in and give a
present.
little update
Yeah.
on how they feel about
I have a
food.
direct line into that cafeteria every day.
I love it.
Nancy did, as I said, an excellent job at South Row last night, really giving a nice overview. Molly McMahon was funny because she said, you know, the kindergartners, they don't know anything different, but everybody else that's been there was like, wow, this is unbelievable, so.
The Power Pack they're producing, it's like a little, I don't even know what it looks like.
Little four square thing.
It has
Yeah,
the
but,
vegetables.
I
and-
forget when you buy them at like the food store.
Oh, you get like whole.
It's like a
you
lunch,
get
it's kind of like a
hamburgers.
lunchable thought, but it's like, you have fresh fruit, you have fresh vegetable, the sandwich looks good, or a salad, cheese, yeah, it was great. Very fresh and appealing. She is working on it.
One thing when Nancy was here several months ago, I think we had talked about possibly having her do at some point an FAQ. And I think that might be a nice idea, because parents just seem to, you know, have some questions that I think that with something like that, it would be taken care of.
Yeah.
You know, it would be just information available at their fingertips to be able to answer some of these questions.
Right, school safety is the next one?
School safety, Linda.
Okay, so obviously, we talked a little bit about Alice already, but just to back it up, so last spring, we had the trainers, so actually, Dr. Lang and myself are trainers, we did the 2-day training, so where Alice trained people that could move forward with the district. So today, those trainers were our principals and other coordinators. They were out in the schools, going through all the drills with the teachers, a lot of the questions that were being. Say again? Oh, yeah, police and fire were at every building, so they were out doing all these trainings with everyone, and they were able to go through any questions that the staff currently have. So this is the first part of the rollout, because we've now just trained our staff for the first time. Obviously, we're gonna have to go through some of these drills. The next part will include, what is this gonna look like for students, and what does this look like for students at each level, right? What type of language you use, there's a lot of literature around there, teachers are looking at which, you know, type of literature they could use with their students based on that level. And then, after that, we have another professional development day marked for this, so that we can bring the larger groups together to have those conversations, because it's all well and good the first day, but if you're not understanding this, and then what does this look like for our students, you have to live it a little bit, so that will happen this, fall. Our teachers were able to take, and I think all of you took the e-learning, was that out to this group?
Yes,
To
it
do
was.
the e-learning modules? So those e-learning modules, I mean, we got a lot of great feedback. The teachers completely understood what different components of Alice that they were there, and it depends on where they are within their building. I mean, as we know, I'm in different buildings, it could be different for me in each place. But a lot of the reception was very good today, and, teachers are starting to understand that at least they have an option rather than, hopefully we never have to enact it, but at least now you have some choices and you can have a little bit more control of it. I think that was very poignant. I know for myself, when you're sitting there hoping the person doesn't pick your room, now at least you can decide where you're going to be. I mean, even when we walked into the high school today, we could hear the drill at the high school, and they were, moving around, and I assumed that they were doing you could evacuate if you could, and they did. They made the announcement that it was in Hawthorne House. We happened to be in the science wing. We would have turned around and walked out had we been in that actual scenario. So we'll now do the rollout with the students, practice the drills, come back as a group to talk about it again, and then continue that practice as we move forward.
I like the training. I mean,
Did you get 100 on the test, though? I would like everybody to go around and tell me their scores. No?
Did you print out your certificate?
You like the training?
I do. And as I mentioned, we use option-based as opposed to Alice
Yeah.
in the system that I'm in. But the one thing I really do hope, too, that the building administrators will take the time to talk to the teachers and, all of the staff, actually, because it is very, very stressful.
It is.
you
I mean,
it
it's all
really
well
is.
and good when you're practicing it, but in a real
Right.
situation.
But, I mean, it really brings things home in a very different way.
Mhm.
And I think that, having some debriefing around this and, what does it feel like? And, to be in this position in which you're making the decision, it's, I think it's worth spending some time on.
It's a
and to
little
make sure
loss
the
of
staff feel-
control, too.
Y-
I
yes.
mean, normally we'd be outside lining up our kids
Right.
alphabetically, making sure, you may not
Right.
have your children.
Exactly.
You're gonna go to
Right.
that rally point and find
Right.
out
Right,
where is everybody.
right,
That's a little unnerving,
very much so.
which is very different.
So as I said, I hope that, we'll spend a little bit of time on that with the staff, just to talk about, the awesome responsibility that it is, and how it's different, and, like you said, what do you do when you can't just line them up nicely and walk right out the door?
Right. And there's right now they have a survey, and then they have almost like a, for lack of a better word, a parking lot online, so teachers, after today, can add to that so that we can compile that
good.
information and just see what type of feedback, if somebody didn't say it verbally today, what does that
Right.
look like in writing?
Right.
I know that Kelly Rogers has been, completely on this, so she will be looking at that data to just see what can go back out to the schools, because at the next faculty meeting, this will be their number one topic.
We'll try to take some of those themes that emerged too from the staff rollout today to the public forum that we do.
Okay, great.
Because I think a lot of the concerns will be similar. So we'll use that for feedback to inform that presentation. Third, we have the SEL MTS update.
So, again, talking about that, we are at the point where we have our facilitators, which are our teacher facilitators, at each of the buildings for the different teams. So we have MTSS teams, so that's a variety of teachers that are on that group, and then we have these very specific facilitators at each school that are gonna be working with those teams and individual teachers to do this rollout. So what does that look like, right? They're getting their first training this week. They're gonna be with Eric Mann, who's one of our consultants, and Katie, whose last name is evading me right now, as the second consultant to train these groups to say, this is what this looks like in your schools. And each of the schools look very different. So, for example, one of the schools is ready to go more of a tier 2 practice, and they're gonna start to dabble in that. So those facilitators will be sharing that role and making that switch. We are doing the rollout of Second Step. Now, Second Step has been in the district for many years, but it kind of disappeared a little bit, so we're resurrecting it, and making sure that those kits are full. And that's the curriculum piece, right? Say again? They're everywhere. I know, I keep getting the slips for them. So they're going to be working on those different modules. They're very user-friendly modules, and that will give that common language and ways that teachers can do that. That doesn't mean that schools are not working on specific things for their schools, like hallway procedures. What does that look like to be present in the hallway opposed to in your classroom? So each of the schools are looking at this differently. And, this is, full-on, it's been, 2 years now, 3 years that we've been working with the consultants, and then we'll make that shift that it's completely school-based.
I understand Kelso the Frog is gone.
Kessel was gone. Our kids knew about Kessel, but we have zones of regulation. We have, second step and how to, work with those pieces, so, yeah.
Talk about that later, I don't know what that.
Kelso the Frog was part of Second Step.
It was part of
He
second
was like
step.
the spokesfrog.
What would Kessel do? We have our conversation with our students and our children and say, well,
Well, apparently he's
would
gone, so I
Kelso do?
missed the Kelso boat, so.
yeah, we missed it.
How was the response when you asked for facilitators? Did you get a good?
It was, it was good, because, that is a little scary at first. You
Yeah.
say, well, what does that mean? Because now you're talking peer-to-peer, right? What does that look like when you have to talk to your peers? You might know what to do, you might be on board with it, but what do you do when they might not be on board with it? But it was the right staff. It was, they're excited. I'm sure a little nervous at the same time, but at least they know they have a consultant and someone to lean on to work on that. And then these groups are coming together, so it's not as if, the buying people are gonna do their buying thing and McCarthy will do their thing. These groups are getting together as a group to be trained, so they can talk school to school. What did you do? What did you do? Oh, that would probably be more appropriate for our school as well. So it's gonna be that sharing piece for them, so it's a semi-administrative role, right?
Yeah.
It's a good stepping stone.
I hate to say this, I have a clue what you're talking about.
So we're talking about social emotional learning, right? So what we did is we put in the budget, and you
Yeah.
approved it, you were very excited about it, Al, I can tell you that right now, we'll pull the tapes. So we put in
I
for
love all the
stipends
slang.
for teachers to be kind of that point person for SEL learning, and what does that look like in the classroom? So if teachers are really working with a student or a group of students, so these teachers are acting more of like I don't want to use the word coaches because it gets a little confusing with the coaches that we currently have. So they'll act like a coach to help those teachers through maybe a specific student situation or a class situation. So it's a stipend position where they get to be almost like a lead in this,
Okay.
a semi-administrator of social emotional
And
learning.
your tiers have to do with the level and type of intervention that you're going to provide based on the student's needs.
Right. So tier one's what we do for
Complicated.
everybody.
Right.
We used to just talk to each other.
They what?
There were no acronyms back then.
They used to just,
Oh, God. Sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah, so tier one is everybody.
Tier one is everyone, like
Yeah.
what you would normally do, and then tier two is some kids need a little bit more, right? And then tier three, they might need a little bit more, and then some. So it's just walking those kids through those steps, depending on what they need.
Do the kids know if they're tier 1, 2, or 3?
No,
And
and the
we make
teachers
them wear
don't know either.
t-shirts.
I bet they do.
Yeah,
I'm really good, I'm at 3.
yeah. No, wrong way, wrong way.
I worked hard to get here.
Yeah, it's like DEF CON, right? You really want to be at DEF CON 5. you
I'm
know?
sorry. But seriously, I gotta be, I had no idea what you're talking about, so thank you.
Yeah, it was just an update of just the
Too, like, I
cost.
forget which principal came in, like, when they were talking about, like, setting up, like, tier 1 initiatives in their schools. I think it might have been Jason Fredette, or one of the elementary schools. Was it South Row? Where they really talked about spending a lot of time about, like, expectations, and, even, like, in the, well, no, I think it was by him, because he talked about, like, say,
Yeah.
how you act in the cafeteria. And they had those special lunches with the tables, cloths, and things like
Yeah.
that. Or, like, how you're gonna act in a hall, and things, like, just getting a whole school kind of on the same.
It's the same language.
I don't want to belabor the point, but seriously, if you read through the whole thing, you wouldn't know what it's about. It doesn't say anything about what it deals with except tier 1 and tier 2.
Oh.
That's what,
Now, the update, you
So,
mean?
yeah, well, the introduction to what we were doing here is because I listened to it, and because of its placement and so forth,
Yeah.
I realize I'm not totally sharp, but there weren't a lot of clues in there about what it. So anyway, this is kind of a little thing for me, because a lot of people in the community get upset about this stuff too. And, there are common themes there, but sometimes we don't always see it, those of us that aren't doing this.
I think you're right, Al, but I will also say this. So, for example, as I'm looking at the tiered support, I know the PBIS uses a tiered
There we
model
go.
of intervention.
I know, I've
But
complained about it.
what I was about to say about that,
Back when Kristen.
Just throw out
Rodriguez was
PBIS.
yeah, I know, but
But
this
you
is
don't
why I
realize
said
it.
that. Is because if you go then, like if your student is, your child is enrolled in a specific school, there's a lot of information that is sent out to the parents about all of these particular initiatives. So, when I was in South Row, there was, very explicit language, for example, all over the school about, you know,
Passports that they use.
exactly.
Yep.
And so I think that, you know, the kids and the families, they may not necessarily get an in-depth explanation from us here, but I think that they are getting it in the schools, at curriculum nights, at PTO meetings, and all of these things.
I realize. I think the people who are most informed, though, are the kids, the people with kids that are involved in it more
Yeah.
directly. Because if you're not involved,
Yep.
you don't pay as much attention.
Right.
But thank you for being patient.
No problem.
Last little update for you, just to follow up from our previous meeting around the kindergarten enrollment numbers, particularly at center school. So at that particular time, we had 103 students. Today, we actually have 102 students. So our average class size is, 25 and a half students. In K, there are no, even though some of them are small, there are no half students. But, so that, those numbers are holding up at the school. We've talked to Diana Fulreader, the principal. I know she's talked a lot with her staff around supports for the classrooms. And what we actually are going to do at this point, Diane has actually pulled some of the extra paraprofessionals from the district, not from the district, from the school, during any open times that they had to be able to kind of help out in the K, just to cut down on numbers. But I actually, in speaking with her, recommended that we hire a couple of paraprofessionals in the morning during the instructional block, and then a couple of paraprofessionals in the afternoon, again during an instructional block. Instead of hiring just one person that can float around the 4 classrooms, do 2 part-time in the morning, 2 part-time in the afternoon. Might be an attractive job for parents if they're actually dropping off a child to school that might want to stay for 2 or 3 hours, or come in the afternoon for 2 or 3 hours, and really just kind of target the instructional time in the 4 classrooms to have another adult be able to go in and work with and assist the parents. Cost-wise, it's neutral as far as whether you do that or you hire a full-time person, and I think the extra hands helping out will help. So I did speak with Diana and worked with HR. We have those postings up today, post for about a week or so. But again, I think we have hopefully a pool of people that we can reach on for those particular jobs, just to again support those 4 classrooms and the teachers over there with those students. Of all of our 4 elementary schools, they happen to have the highest enrollment in K this year, and just want to make sure the kids get off to a good start.
Do we have to do anything budget-wise for those positions?
Not at this point. What we're gonna end up doing is, they will just be charged to the paraprofessional salary account. We're still kind of shaking out the account as we go. So I will bring a recommendation to you if we have to move funds. But oftentimes, we will develop little surpluses over the course of the year in, say, the paraprofessional accounts, if people either leave and are replaced. It is a group where we do get some movement during the course of the year. So it only ends up costing, to do this with the 4 people part-time, about $24,000 for the year. So it's not too significant. I know we'll have the funding for it.
Okay.
Whether it's in the right line or not is the question.
Yeah.
I'll bring in that transfer if we have to. But we have sufficient funds to get the year at least started.
We talked to the kindergarten teachers. I mean, is there a number that is recommended for class size for kindergarten? Is 25 within the range? I know it is for high school and middle school. I don't know if it is for lower elementary.
Asking me?
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
it's
I
anyone.
Yeah, I mean, typically what we like to see at the elementary level is, 22 to 24 is kind of a common range. I think that's ideal. Moving up to, say, 25, and this has happened not only at the school but at other schools, doesn't necessarily just trigger adding another section to bring it down to 20. I think ideally, we want to make sure that the kids are in the classrooms and they're supported. A couple of different factors come into this. If we're looking at numbers that are, say, over 100, when we're planning on a budget in the springtime and we're going through the hiring process, we might have that discussion and say, does it make sense because we think there might be another development opening in the area? Like, one thing I am looking at is that new housing development down at the end of Mill Road, right around the corner there. Technically, that is zoned to center. What we may end up coming to do at some point in time when they really open up is rezone that whole development to South Row, because the buses go by that way anyway, and we could easily accommodate the kids at South Row. I'd much rather take a whole development than piecemeal it and have them meet some friends and go together. But again, I think at this point of the year too, the classrooms have kind of been established. Kids are in classrooms, they're getting to know the teachers are knowing the kids. I actually don't think it would be in the best interest to just open up a fifth section at this time. I think given the numbers, being right around 25, 26, it makes sense to just add some additional supports to the classrooms. And then obviously, we're going to continue monitoring this. Every week or two, we take a look district-wide at the numbers. If a number's in any class, not only this class, but started creeping up to 26, 27, 28, obviously, we would act if we had to at that point. But I think this is manageable at this point.
Do we ever compare performance? I mean, there's a fluctuation of population at kindergarten. Do we compare if South Row has a banner year and they're able to have a class under 20, compare it to a center class of 25 and how they progress?
I'm just trying to think what that looks like, I mean, right now, with full day K only being in its second year, we are planning on following these students to see how they're doing academically. I don't think we've broken it down to go back to say, well, you were in a class of 20. We could technically do that. I'm just trying to think where that would, what information that would give us. That's just me thinking in my head.
Yeah.
But as we
A
follow these
comparison of
students.
25, which seems very high for a kindergarten,
Yeah.
to 18 to 20.
And I think it all depends on the level of the students, so say, like, we're
Yeah,
talking
there's other
about,
variables.
there's so, because it's a human being, right? If
When
it was
did
a-
we know that these class populations would be that high? Did we know in the summer? Do we just find out on the first day of school?
No, I mean,
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I mean, I think it was like within the first couple of
it
weeks of
was
school,
leading up
people
to the
started.
start
After
of-
school
to-
started.
well, leading up to the start of school. For whatever reason, not only at this particular school, we had a lot of people just come to enroll their kids, like the week before
Yeah.
school
Oh, yeah.
started,
Yeah.
even the week
Harrington
of
has always
school
been
started.
famous for that.
And particularly where we went
And Harrington
back to
wasn't
school
this year.
before. Yeah, Harrington was bad this
Yeah,
year.
believe it or not,
But
that's
we
what
went
we
back
expected
before
it.
Labor Day, people were still coming in that week of Labor Day and even the week after to enroll. So the numbers did continue to kind of creep up as
Creep
that
up,
was,
okay.
was going on.
And that could be a combination of, people buying homes, when did they close? I don't know enough about these new developments, like when did they get their leases? Because I knew that used to be an issue at Harrington with one of the complexes, that the leases, they wouldn't give them to until September, I think it was like 3rd or 5th, so they couldn't enroll their students, so that's where Harrington saw that big influx.
The one category, we mentioned this at the last meeting, the one category of students in the district now that we're always gonna have somewhat trouble gauging is the kindergarten. It used to be the first grade because we only had the half-day kindergarten. Now at least students are coming to us earlier, so they're actually, coming for the full-day kindergarten program. But that's the one group where our NESDEC enrollment projection number is pretty much online with the total number of kindergarten students we were anticipating, but it doesn't break it down by neighborhood. Like, the NESDEC projection doesn't say there's so many people in that particular neighborhood.
Right.
So even though your overarching numbers are fine, and like, I would have expected the BIAM numbers to be the lowest this year in K, and Senate
They were
to be the
bursting at the
highest,
seams
because
just
they
2
were
years
2
ago.
years ago, and they still, I think they're gonna have more growth with the developments as they
Yes.
continue to open up. But I mean, that was a total flip-flop, so, that is really hard. We can make adjustments, now going forward, first grade and on, because there are students, and we don't get a lot of movement, number-wise, between grade levels once they're here, but that K number is a little bit flexible. And they're really, as much as we try to do the winter and the spring registration, and we try to encourage people to come register, you also can't turn them down if they don't. There's no stick, so people can just kind of come at the last minute and sign up.
Do we do
But I-
iReady in kindergarten?
We do, but we won't benchmark them until closer to November, only because they're just getting into school right
Because the
now.
only reason I ask is, I think one of the concerns, for any kindergarten group is, are we catching, any issues that these kids may be having early enough? And I know that iReady, while certainly not going to give us.
Yeah, that's we
Just
still
one
have our
component.
dibbles, and we still have
Exactly.
our,
Right.
it's one of our math benchmarks, it's
Yep.
internal, and you sit with the students
Right.
one-on-one, similar to what you would do for dibbles, and that's how they can do their reading groups and also catch kids if they do need some type of support.
Because I think that, certainly, you want kids to have a very positive experience and develop some skills, but I do worry about making sure that we have enough resources and staff to be able to catch any problems early on so that we can, help kids out and support them in the way that they need it.
Which was trying to get them into their routines right
Right,
now.
exactly,
And
yeah.
just, being good citizens, what's it
Right.
like to walk down the hallway?
Oh, yeah.
Use the bathroom, those
I'm
types
still
of
working on it
things.
with my
Yeah,
kids,
it's fine.
Yeah.
No, we do, we have all those resources, and between the reading specialist, the math and reading interventionist, depending on which schools that they're located at, based on the population, And then, the math coach, we just make sure that we have those kids and we have some identification prior to an iReady that wouldn't happen until
Right, much later,
November-ish,
right.
because we don't want them in front of a, computer first.
Right,
out of the
exactly.
gate.
Yes, absolutely. And the teachers felt comfortable with this, this intervention that we were going to use in terms of adding the extra
Yeah,
paraprofessionals?
we had asked, I walked through the rooms with Linda and others. I didn't meet personally with the teachers. Diana, the principal, did. And, yeah, I think they put everything on the table as far as, even opening up a new classroom, these kind of supports. And there's no just cut and dry answer.
Right,
Because
right.
a lot of this is too, again, you're a few weeks into the school year now. The teachers have made relations with the kids. How do, even if we're gonna add another classroom, how do you identify the 5 kids that you're now gonna ask to go to the other room? If there were even a decision to be made to say add another classroom, the other thing that you're at a little bit of a competitive disadvantage with is actually finding a really quality teacher for those kids. So there's nothing to say that if we posted and tried to attract the teacher to that role, if we don't get the right candidate or it's not the right fit, that could actually be more problematic than keeping the 4 teachers who we know are good and who are working with the kids and just providing them extra supports. So I think we're taking this in steps. Certainly there's been input on all levels, and I think this particular plan of providing the extra assistance during the instructional blocks makes the most sense at this point in time. Money is not an object. We're not doing this because it's cheaper to do this than it is to hire a full-time person or a teacher. I think this is really the best solution at this point in time for the numbers that are presenting themselves.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to monitor, and I'd obviously bring you adjustments if they were ever warranted.
Any other questions on
On kindergarten or at the end?
kindergarten?
What's that?
No, she has other questions beyond kindergarten. She was just clarifying.
We're not
She
there
has
yet.
questions. Donna has questions. It's not on kindergarten.
All right. So we're good with it. So the next thing is approval of school committee policies.
No.
Yeah.
Still on initiatives. I just want to know if we were done with kindergarten.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah,
there's
sorry.
no more initiatives, are there?
No, I know, I had
She's
one
going
that.
to add one.
Yeah,
I already have a committee.
You can add it at the end.
No, in all seriousness, before we get too far into the school year, I'd like to revisit transportation, because I think we can say that, there were some things that really went well, and there were some things that, we need to kind of improve upon. And I would like to make sure that we, make note of those before we go, like I said, too far into the school year. So, for example, making sure that parents understand you have to push that final button, to register your kids. Because I think there was a lot of families that felt that they did register their kids only to find out much later on that they hadn't put them in the payment category, and so it didn't register them. The other is it sounds like Peter got just bombed with phone calls and emails. And I know that people were frustrated, that they didn't feel that people were getting back to them in a timely fashion. So what do we have to do to support him, as we begin the school year, to make sure that people get their questions answered? And then the last thing is, I think part of the problem is there was a lot of late ads. And so, we can't just change the software, right? We can't just, I don't know what we do to update the routes once they're set in the with the software. And do we have to let parents know that if you register after a certain date, your bus stop may not be, set, because, we've already got the routes all set, and it's just the week before school, so, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to do that, and I think in a lot of the literature that we sent home to families, we said by X date, we're gonna base the routes on that particular schedule.
All right.
We could be more explicit, next time around, but like, this information is communicated to people, and at some point in time, you do have to lock in and make
Right.
the actual bus routes. And I forget exactly how many, I think it was around August 15th that we actually kind of locked in, but there had to be 600-something registrations after that point in time,
Right.
which, skew the stops, and people
Exactly.
they still want the stop, where they want the stop, and it's a lot to add 600,
Absolutely.
kids on at
Right.
that point in time.
Right, so what do we do about that, right? Because I think that was, I don't know what to do about it, but I'm just saying that I think that this is something worth exploring before we get too far into the school year. And, transportation has been replaced with something else that's come up. I would like to try and close this up and make sure that we have things in place for next year. you know, including, like I said, making sure that Peter has the support so that he can answer these phone calls and emails, and making sure that parents understand to go through the full registration process.
Maybe Peter can go through his notes and create a frequently asked questions.
That was something we had actually talked about at one point,
I
is
mean,
having
he's already
frequently
dealt
asked
with every one
questions.
of the issues. Every issue can
Yep.
be a question.
I think we had talked about that at one point several meetings ago, so that might be worth pursuing as well.
I would also think that a lot of this stuff will, like, because of the change this year, will shake out a little bit. Like,
Yep,
if you knew you made that
absolutely.
mistake last year and didn't hit the button, you might say, oh, I gotta remember to do that, or,
Someone
wow,
else
this
will
was,
always
this
take their
was
place."
very difficult, right, oh, of course. But I think there was such a large amount of people. I mean, we're used to
Yes.
the way the bus
Yes.
runs used to be. I mean, I used to have to walk down to the school, look for my street.
Yeah.
I remember those days where I'll kind of like
also
hovering
independent.
over it, then it turns into, now it's online, now we're creating bus routes based on the actual needs. So it's a change for a lot of
Absolutely.
families, and I think at this point, they'll realize, oh, wow, I don't want to be in that 3-4 day limbo, whatever it was, I'm making up days, by the way, of what it takes to get into the software and then get your stop. So it kind of pushes you a little bit forward to get that work done. So hopefully, I'm not saying that that's the end-all, be-all, but I don't anticipate
Yeah.
it being as large next year because
And I don't disagree, I'm just saying, you know, if we have something in place, you know, in case it does happen, then we're gonna be prepared. You know, so.
we'll send them connected.
What's that?
We'll send them a connected.
We did.
All right, good? Okay. All right, so next thing is the policies, the last two sections. So once we're done with these, we've provisionally approved them all, and then
Yeah, we've got a couple of cleanup ones.
Right. We're gonna
that
wait
are
for
up
the final
legal
version.
review, so then
Yeah.
we're just waiting for those.
So we're doing section K, which is community relations, and in section L, which is education agency relations. Same thing, we'll read through them. If anybody has any questions. All right, so section K, KA, school community relations goals, MASC policy. Questions?
No.
KBA, school parent relationship goals, MASC. KBBA, non-custodial parent rights, MASC. KBE, relations with school parent organizations, MASC. KCB, community involvement in decision-making, MASC. KCD, public gifts to schools, MASC. KDB, public right to know, MASC. KDD, media relations dissemination of news, Chelmsford. KE, public complaints, MASC. KF, community use of school facilities, MASC. KHA, public solicitations in the schools, MASC. KHB, advertising in the schools, MASC. KHC, distribution of materials and announcements, Chelmsford. KI, visitors to school, MASC. KLG, relations with police authorities, MASC. KLJ, relations with planning authorities, MASC. KLK, relations with local governmental authorities, MASC. That's K. Any questions on those? All right, last section, L, education agency relations. LA, education agency relations goals, MASC. LB, relations with other schools and school districts, MASC. LBC, relations with non-public schools, MASC. LDA, student teaching and internships, MASC. And LH, relations with school accreditation agencies, Chelmsford. That is that, for the most part.
For the most part. Yeah, we really don't have much left.
So we have to provisionally approve these.
I would do them, just
Yeah.
be consistent.
Okay. So you wanna make a motion, Al?
I move that we give provisional approval to sections K and L of our policies.
Second.
Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I want to make one comment. I just want to thank the policy subcommittee for doing this project. This is a lot of work,
Yeah.
and it was needed, so I'm glad it got done. So thank you.
We see tonight from the, the activities thing, something would need to be done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some updates, and
Yeah.
I think as we look back on it, there were like 2 or 3 policies across the whole, policy manual that basically were out for further legal review. So I'll work with Mike Gilbert to try to get those back. And as soon as we do, hopefully it'll be in October, bring those 3 policies forward. And then what Mike indicated is, I'll give him all the final updated policies that we did. He'll basically put it all together into one manual. He'll give us the paper copy. We'll start working on the electronic copy of them, and we should be in great shape.
And we have to give them final approval once they're in that.
Oh, then, yeah, Andy will actually help us create the actual vote to take, to basically just adopt these policies going forward, so.
I think it should be noted that he saved us huge amounts of time with his experience in telling us this is a new statute or whatever the situation was. So
Yeah.
it made our decision-making much quicker.
Right. This is a policy, that's not a policy, you can put that somewhere else, that type of thing, yeah.
Yeah, he was good about separating out policies from procedures
Right.
and all of that, so, no, it's coming to an end.
All right, field trips.
Field trips, you have 2 before you this evening for approval. Parker School looking to go next June, they're planning early for their 6th grade Grade East performance at Canopy. And I'm just looking for your permission to attend a conference in the end of November.
I move that we approve the Parker Middle School field trip that includes grade 6 band, chorus, and orchestra on June 7th at Canopy Lake Park.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye. I move that we approve Superintendent Lang's request for a conference in Houston, Texas that deals with learning. It's a national gathering, and the dates are November 28th to the 30th.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Okay. Any liaison reports?
I had Southrow PTO last night. They have their ice cream social coming up next week, and the pumpkin fair is on the horizon. So they are up and running and just do a phenomenal job. They had a really nice turnout last night. It was great to see so many parents there.
Anybody else?
I don't have a liaison report directly. I do want to say that I went to my 4th BIAM orientation night as a parent, which is a lot of fun. Did a really great job of introducing the parents to all the teachers. It was pretty hot in the building, but everybody muscled through it.
Anybody else? Al?
No, I just say as a Facebook follower, it's impressive to see the number of opportunities that kids are given, particularly at the elementary level.
I ended up going to the Boosters Club meeting. It's our first meeting of the year, so just gathering some volunteers, kind of going over what they do, and they do a lot of fundraising that benefits the kids in terms of awards at the end of the year, jackets, and scholarships, that type of thing. And most of the money that they raise is from the snack shacks at the games and the snack bars and indoor games. They had a pretty good turnout there, about 20, 30 people. I'm sure they would love to have more. So they meet every first Thursday of the month. So the next meeting is the 4th, October 4th. It's at the high school in the cafeteria. So if anybody's interested in helping out with the snack bars and that, and helping the Boosters Club, I'm sure they're welcome to help.
Is that open to people who don't have high school kids?
Yeah,
Like if you have 8th graders that are going up?
I
can you-
believe so. Yeah, I think everybody could be. I don't know if you know any.
But I'm sorry, I was
Is
thinking
that- is
what I was
that
going to
open?
ask.
Is that only open to high school, or can you be like an 8th grade parent moving
Oh,
up to
I'm
the high
sure
school?
they let you work in the shack if you were like
Yeah.
to put the.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any guide rules, but it used to be, to a large extent, football. But now they cover not only our own kids' activities, but outside groups that use our facilities. So they have a lot of opportunities, and they're pretty aggressive in getting people to cover the shack,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
I have a thing that I'd like to ask about. It just occurred to me a little while ago. I wanted to bring it up. There was a major change in the business department, in that we lost one person in the business department, right? Moved him down. I was just surprised by that because in my dealing with the kids, you know, through Rotary and other things, everybody talks about that when they go to school, they're going in psych and business, but business and psych it's always one of the top two. And I think that the loss has huge implications.
Enrollment was down, though.
Yeah, I know, but my question is why?
Why
Why,
is
if all the kids,
Well, I mean, I feel that way about Latin, too, but
no,
enrollment's
but,
down.
well, I don't think I'm exaggerating in terms of talking with kids. All the kids that want, a lot of the kids, what's their goal now? They love the word, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
Oh,
but they're not signing up for the class.
yeah, but then I think there's a reason, and you know, I don't know if this is something that, because you deal with it all the time, you may be able to, I don't expect an answer now, but was there a curriculum change in another area, either with fine arts and practical arts, or the health requirement, or something else? And this is the kind of thing that when we make changes, we're not in a position, like when we approve the health thing, or whatever, we're gonna do health because there's a big problem. But we don't always have the foresight to see what that bumps out or changes. So, again, I don't think it's a major problem, but I know it's gonna have impact. It's gotta impact DECA. I'm not making excuses, but out of the other two, one's a head football coach at this time of year. You know, I mean, we're gonna have a reality fair, which we did with them last year, which you know about, where the kids role play, the different things. Well, it was supposed to be on the 16th, and there's no way, I gotta choose my language. There's no way in hell it's gonna be on the 16th. Dr. Sweeney already, no, that was sort of true. I just stuck with my vocabulary. Dr. Sweeney's already told us that they're gonna put it off to the 24th. I think the reality is they're gonna put it off, because I don't think they can do it. And I'm just concerned where DECA has also been such a major program. So, if you just, I think you get where I'm coming from. I have a concern that it's gonna affect in a number of ways that may not have been seen at some point. And it's not because of the personnel, I care less about the personalities in the situation. I'm just concerned because it has been.
I mean, there could
It's
be
a
a
major
questionnaire,
activity.
we could send a questionnaire to the students, why, you know.
Oh, you make it.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think
Discussion
it's
on it.
necessarily all, like, there's more components to this. I mean, a lot of these skills that you might have been separated in perhaps like a business course and now being absorbed into other courses. So it's not that it's not important and it's not being taught, it's just that it's coming in a different fashion. Like, I mean, even the business department, the math department share a common course, the AM/DM class, where a math teacher teaches it for half the year, the business teacher picks up on the second half of the year. So
Okay.
it's a matter of really looking into the programming
see.
rather than, here's this silo of a class.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I mean, enrollment affects everything, as we know, we're opening classes,
Yeah.
closing classes, adding grades, removing grades. But a lot of those, some of those skills can then be absorbed in another class rather than just, here's this. Like, same thing happened with technology. You know, you're not just teaching a technology class, it should be incorporated in everything that the students are doing. So I think you might just be seeing a little bit of that shift as well,
Yeah.
concurrently. And it is a small department to begin with, and it's within the same size as most of schools in this district. That's why we call them like a low-incident group. And they're looking at their programming as well.
I take responsibility. I should have done a better job of informing you of that change. There was some staffing changes that happened right as the school year was starting. I'll jot down some notes and email the committee, just some updates on that.
Just one last thing, I would be remiss if I did not mention that the Chelmsford CPAC is having a workshop next week. And it's from, it's called True Colors, and it is from 7 to 9 on Thursday, the 27th, in the Learning Commons.
All right, any other new items? Donna mentioned transportation, Al mentioned biz department. Anybody have anything else?
No, just the audit information.
Okay. The only other thing I would just ask at some point, an update on how we're doing with the parking lots,
Yeah.
in terms of when the striping is gonna be done, when center school, and Harrington, that's the other one, was it gonna?
I'll try to put that on for next time for you.
An update on the employee handbook, just where we're at with that.
You just wanted to know what people thought of
Yeah,
it, right?
people thought,
Oh.
Yeah, just wanted to get a feel for
yeah,
any
after
issues.
all that work they put in,
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's
a little bit more time.
Right, any other items? Okay, we'll open up to public comment if anybody would like to make any other. Okay.
I'm a parent, but I'm also.
Come on up and
Come on
have a
up,
seat,
sit.
and you're talking to the
I don't
mic.
even know these
So you have to
things.
start your name and
Yeah,
everything
just-
else
Okay.
again, name,
There you live.
address,
All right.
Name and
So I'm
social
Jeanette
security
Moreau.
number. No kidding.
I live on Main Street in North Chelmsford. I have a daughter at Parker, and I have a daughter that actually did an outplacement at the Valley Collaborative.
Could you just spell your last name?
Sure. Moreau. And I'm really here because I'm actually a social work student, and I'm taking a social advocacy class, and we're required to go view some kind of local committee. And so being interested in social emotional learning, I saw that on the agenda that was being discussed tonight. So that's why I'm here, sitting like a fly on the wall, listening to everything. I really have nothing official to say.
Oh, welcome.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, thanks for
Thank you for
coming.
coming.
And as it turned out, then you also talked about the second step and the Alice training, so it worked
So
out
you knew
well.
what I was talking about.
I totally did.
Oh, good. See, yeah, I feel much better.
It's her major.
And I used to be a school counselor, so I knew what the PBIS was.
There you go, all right,
I
see?
understand.
Do you have an admin certification?
No, but I was taking notes on that there, I have to tell you.
Well, thank you for choosing us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank you.
No, thanks for coming.
not making me feel really weird that I'm the only one here.
No, but it was good that you came up and told us. because
Yeah, absolutely.
it's
We really thought it was weird.
I thought it was weird if I just like walked out and not said anything. You gotta write that down in the official notes. That is really not weird. She's okay.
Well, we just told you, we're on TV, so.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, I'll entertain a mo-
Move we adjourn.
Second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks a lot.
Barbara,
Thank you.
may I ask a question?
Good meeting.